Welcome in, everyone, to the Voice of College Football on a Thursday night kickoff show. My apologies to those on the line when the feed went down. So if you're watching afterwards, if you're watching the Rewatch Squad version and edition, then keep in mind that there's 10 or 15 or 20 minutes of another version of the first part of our call-in show, and we continue right now. So I appreciate everybody waiting patiently, and we appreciate everyone who then was flexible enough to just stay on the homepage and rejoin the show. All right, we'll pick it up with our analysis of Week 10 in college football. Please like the video and please join the show by grabbing the link that I've left in the chat, and we will leave it a few other times as well. All right, let's go to the real MVP. Hey, man, how's it going tonight?
It's going good. How about you, Mark?
I am doing well.
Well, last week I said the Wake Forest line versus Louisville kind of looked suspicious to me and made no rational sense to me. And I think you got the same feelings and takeaways.
Yes.
And now we kind of know why that was the case. This week, the game, I have no idea why the line is the way it is Kansas is favored against Oklahoma State.
Well, they're obviously playing at home.
Yes.
I would guess. Okay. I didn't see that line. Wow. I would not have guessed that. And Vegas usually doesn't overreact to one result, which of course would be Oklahoma State getting completely trashed last week, but they're still, we think, a good football team. Yeah. What's the point spread?
I saw it. Currently it's 1 point Kansas. I believe earlier it was 3. But somebody would have to fact check me on that. But currently it's 1. So it's not a huge point spread, but still. I thought Oklahoma State was going to be 7-8 point favorites in the game.
Yep. That's where I would have went with that line too.
Do you have something that I don't know about that game?
The only thing I've got is that Oklahoma State got completely throttled last week. And unless somebody knows that something happened between the week before and that week to make this football team completely different than it's ever been, then I don't know.
Okay, and the other game I want to hit on that kind of surprised me is Texas is favored against Kansas State. And the game is at Kansas State.
Well, I do believe that Vegas has certain lines on certain teams that they have confidence in because of talent. And I think that is one game that leans in that direction.
I understand that, but for it being a road game and for Texas still being 2.5 point favorite, and with the way they've played and with the way Kansas State has played recently, it's kind of surprising to me. I figured it'd be close, but I thought Kansas State would be a little bit of a favorite.
I would also guess that if you really went into advanced metrics on points per play or yards per play and those sorts of metrics, that Texas would turn to be a more formidable team based on those things. Texas has lost a game in which they led by 17 points against Oklahoma State. They lost to Alabama by 1 point. They lost a fourth quarter lead to Texas Tech. Kansas State has lost to Tulane by a touchdown. That was early in the season, and then they lost that. And there was a heavy condition on that they lost to TCU only when they led by 18 points and lost 2 quarterbacks.
Yeah, I get that. Mark, can you zoom in on that list of games? It's kind of hard to see it from that far zoomed out. Just a game to highlight just because it's always one of the cool games of the year's Air Force at Army.
Yeah.
Part of the Commanders and Chiefs trophy, Mark. Do you have a way you're leaning on that game?
I have absolutely no idea. I couldn't even tell you what those teams' records are. I would guess that Air Force is like 6-2 right now, and Army's probably 5-3 would be my guess. Yeah, I have not seen one down of Army or Air Force football this year.
Okay, and I guess I probably should talk about my team, Mark, the team I root for, the Kentucky Wildcats. I thought the bottom of the barrel fell out when we lost to South Carolina. Then I saw the Vegas line for Kentucky, Missouri. Kentucky's only a 2.5 point favorite, Mark. So, that's a good shot. We lose the game.
Where's the
It,
game?
it's at Missouri, but I mean, does Missouri have that much of a home field advantage?
Well, they have some home field advantage. And by the way, Air Force is 5-3 and Army's 3-4. Missouri is coming off an impressive win against South Carolina. They didn't just win that game, they were in control of that game.
Yeah, I get that. I'm reading your comment section, and Mike Fort is actually saying Missouri's favored against Kentucky.
Okay.
Now, if that is true, that is surprising to me. But
well, again, I think there are some things working there that Vegas looks at, that Missouri has played Georgia as close as they have at home. They're coming off a win against South Carolina on the road, a game that was close on the scoreboard, but it really wasn't that close. And then they should have beaten Auburn if they could have made a PAT. They played Florida close. That was a one-score game.
yeah, I get that. But as a Kentucky fan, the only games we lost to was a Ole Miss team that's 8-1, a Tennessee team that hasn't lost, and Kentucky didn't have their quarterback Will Levis when they lost to South Carolina. So, it's not like Kentucky's played horrible. It's not like Kentucky's season's completely over. But 7-5 and finishing fourth or fifth in the SEC East would probably be a disappointment this year for Kentucky. Wouldn't you say that, Mark?
Well, yeah, I would think they've gotten to a place as a program where, yeah, that's a disappointment. And it's a disappointment for me based on what I expected them to do, which I believe I picked them 9-3.
Yeah, but there is a few teams, even if Kentucky loses, that I believe will be lower than us. And that game is actually going to be featured, but right below us on the screen. Florida at Texas A&M, Mark. The battle of, what would you call it? The disappointments. Two of the three worst SEC teams.
You're right. You're right. And I actually had a conversation today with our Texas A&M guy from 247 Sports, and earlier in the week, David Waters from Gators Breakdown, and I made a similar comment about both of these teams. But I will say, huge difference between Billy Napier first season, still putting things together, still working his program, hasn't had really a full recruiting class, all those things that come with being a first-year head coach, versus Jimbo Fisher. No excuses. It's your fifth year. You've got everything in the world at your fingertips. You've got no excuses. So from that standpoint, I think we're in completely different worlds. But from the standpoint of, yeah, you're Texas A&M, you shouldn't be 3-5, and you're Florida, you shouldn't be 4-4, and both teams are 1-4 in the conference. Yes.
Yeah, they're both complete disasters. Now, imagine, Mark, if Florida, okay, went 1-5 in the SEC, but beat a team in a different conference that could win its conference. Wouldn't that be crazy? It would almost be like if the SEC is significantly better than a different conference. Now, I'm going to say which conference, but clearly this is
okay. I was hoping we wouldn't get away from this conversation because I was about to be sorely disappointed that you didn't bring that SEC hammer in here.
Oh, I've got to, Mark. I've got to, because I was listening to the Pac-12 show and they were just ripping on the committee and the rankings and saying how it's all coordinated. It all goes back to Bama. They've got that conspiracy theory board and they've got all them lines drawn up and every person's connected to Bama because person A is connected to person B that's connected to person C that shook hands with person D that works at Bama or something like that. So it's like, my gosh, people.
Well, what's funny is that what they are accusing the committee of and the SEC, I get it, in that people don't like the SEC because people don't typically like whoever's on top. and want to bring the SEC down. And the SEC usually has the most teams in the rankings, and they have the highest teams in the rankings. Therefore, then you look at all, then you can, so you can make that case. Okay, well, Alabama's only at this place because they can justify all the ranking because they've beaten all these ranked teams. Well, they just artificially ranked Arkansas, Mississippi State, whomever they ranked, and that props up Alabama because then you can point to the ranked wins, and they did the same thing with LSU. And I get their point that can be done, but you could talk about that with any team that's ranked. I could start to pick apart their schedule and say, well, they're not really that good. They're not really that good, and they shouldn't be ranked. And you can do that with anyone. They just happen to do that. And I'm not picking on our Pac-12 guys. I love our Pac-12 guys. They're doing what a lot of people do. And I was in the chat for part of that show last night, and I thought it was funny because they were naming like half the conference in the Pac-12 could beat LSU, which is obviously a joke. And I'm sitting there thinking, you know what? For all the love that the committee apparently gave to LSU and that they're picking on the committee for, I've got LSU ranked higher than the committee does.
Yeah, I didn't want to bring that fact up. You should have went in the show and mentioned that to them. But Mark, since there's so much SEC bias everywhere, what's the SEC's record in playoff games?
Ooh, I added this up the other. It's like 13-14-4. So we'll take out the two games that they played against each other. So in 14, 0-1, 15, 2-1, 16, 3-2, 17 would be 3-2, 5-2, 18 would be 6-3, 19 would be 8-3, 20 would be 10-3, 21 would be 12-3. 12-3. And the other conferences, they're not even close.
Yeah, exactly. If there was this SEC bias type thing, Mark, you think eventually it would get exposed between the white lines on the field? Because if it was truly the talent disparity that people claim it is, the SEC would lose some of these games or even not be competitive in some of these games. Like earlier, before the stream ended, One Scoop John, he mentioned that I think that 3 SEC teams and one Big Team should get in. So that means only one of 6 teams should get in the playoff of Ohio State, Michigan, UCLA, USC, TCU, and Clemson. It's like, yeah, if the 3 SEC teams played all of those teams in a round robin, okay, the SEC record against them is what? 14-4, 15-3.
Well, you're looking at college football differently than they are. Well, I will say that, yes, that's probably one point. And then point number 2 is you are convinced based on all the evidence from the last 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. And since that evidence hasn't been interrupted, it hasn't been overturned this season by anything, that you're just a firm believer that those are the best football is played in the SEC. It's played in the SEC in like 1 or 2 other places in the country, basically, but it's mostly in the SEC. And there's really nothing to combat your opinion. They want everyone to be treated equally based on record, pretty much.
Well, idealistic world, I would be there with them. But Mark, this isn't an idealistic world. And sometimes there are certain places that like and care about certain things more than other places. So we should give those people that care and try the hardest more respect than the other places. I don't understand why this is so hard for people to understand. Like, look at Arkansas. Arkansas can go 8-4. And with their schedule, they could go, what, 10-2 in the Big 12? In the ACC?
Probably.
Yeah, exactly. This isn't which conference, Mark, has the most talent?
The SEC.
Which conference has the best head coach?
Well, you know me, I'd like to sit there and size them all up and list them and so forth. But off the top of my head, yeah, Kirby Smart, Brian Kelly, Nick Saban, etc. SEC.
Yeah, which conference has had the most NFL players drafted?
The SEC.
And which conference has won the title the last 3 years in a row by 3 different teams?
The SEC.
Exactly. I mean, it gets to a point where it can't be debated and argued, but people want it argued.
Yeah.
And, Mark, I used to be against the 12-team playoff because I thought it was a ridiculous idea that would completely expose the sport for the regionality of it. But, since I really believe people think they are competitive with the SEC. So you know what, Mark? Let's implement the 12-team playoff this year. And then when the final 3-4 of the 4 teams is Alabama, Georgia, and Tennessee, then what will people say? We got to go to 16? We got to go to 32? Because look at the March Madness. Sure, St. Peter's beats Kentucky, and shout out to them. But who won the tournament? Kansas, a powerhouse. It funnels down to the best teams, the powerhouse teams.
One Scoop John is letting us know, and maybe One Scoop John could join us. Is he in the? No. One Scoop John is saying, I'm talking about this year, 2022, DeReal.
If he would like to join us and explain to me how Tennessee, Alabama, and Georgia aren't 3 of the 4 best teams in the country, I would love to hear that explanation.
Well, okay. I agree with you in that. So again, I want everything to be judged based on just purely 2022. Okay, let's start there. I don't want brand names. I don't want past performance. If some team was a 1-11 team last year and they miraculously became one of the best teams in the country, I want them to be recognized and rewarded for that, and for us not to hold that against them that they were awful last year. That's difficult for all of us to do, but let's do our best and we'll just focus on this season. So we don't have a whole lot to go on, but the SEC has played better than the other conferences. See, this is what I think is working here, is that the SEC has played slightly better outside of the conference than a few of the other conferences this season. But and I know, because it's been proven over and over, this is not like for the last 20 years, sometimes the ACC is the best conference, and sometimes it's the Big Ten, and sometimes it's the SEC, and it's all over the place. It's the NFL, let's say. And then we are arriving at 2022 trying to figure out the best conference, and it's slightly the SEC. I would say based on the performances outside the conference, whether that's Bama, Texas, Georgia, Oregon, on down the line, the SEC, I've posted the videos and run through all the results, is the best conference, but not by a ton. However, I hope I can speak for you, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. You're also connecting, as I am. Now, I don't think this should factor into a playoff selection, but it factors into reality that the SEC has been the best over and over and over and over every year, and it's not that close. And nothing has happened this year to change that, to show us that anything has changed. So we're about 98% sure that the SEC and its best teams are still the best by a pretty wide margin, unless your name's Ohio State and maybe Clemson.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And, Mark, with these big non-conference games you schedule, if you win, there is no good scenario for you. Because you're Alabama, you go on the road in Texas, you only win by 1 point. Well, you're no good. You only won by 1 point, Mark. You're just no good. You're terrible. Or guess what? If you're Georgia and you beat Oregon by 46 points, well, guess what? Oregon just had a bad game. They're just terrible. So either way, you're screwed. You can't blow them out. You can't play really close. You have to play in somewhere right in the middle between 14 and 21 points for people to give you respect. Because if you play too close, you're bad. And if you blow them out, they're bad. So what are you supposed to do?
You're right. And in Florida's case, they beat Utah, who may end up winning the Pac-12. Who knows? They probably won't, but they're close. They beat USC, and nobody looks at Florida as being a very good football team.
Yeah, Mark, can we make this a multi-call? There's some people I'm seeing in your comment section that want in on this conversation.
Who do we have? Who do you see that wants in?
Mike Ford has said he wants in
All
on
right.
this.
Yeah, let's get Mike in here. He can represent the Big Ten. Hey, Mike, how you doing tonight? Good to see you.
Oh my God, I am just going nuts
Oh,
here.
I bet you are. Okay, hang
Okay,
on.
first of all, there is literally no argument you can make that says Bama's top 4. No argument. Quinn Ewers goes down. Hudson Card is basically limping around, and you win by 1. You commit 50 penalties. Will Anderson's still offsides right now. There is no way Alabama is a top 4 team. They go to Texas A&M. Texas A&M has a chance to win it on the 2-yard line. They get Texas, which is 3-5, terrible. And then Tennessee, which has no defense whatsoever. I don't care what anybody says. Their defense is crap.
I don't know about that.
Their secondary is horrible. I mean, if you want to make an argument for their rushing defense, their defense is bad. And I know
they were playing maybe the best quarterback in the country, and they were playing Alabama's talent. I don't know that Tennessee's played that bad a defense other than that one game. They've been getting better and better. Their defense it's not great. I'm not selling them as the 85 Bears.
Over 20 points to some directional school in their own or some city in their own state, like Chattanooga or Martin or something.
Are we really going to evaluate that game?
When it's an FCS team, yeah, I think that needs to be put into fact.
Well, Mike, my point is, if they would have given up 24 points and scored 28, then we're freaking out going, what's wrong with them? But they scored 65. It was 52-7 at one point. I don't even know if the trainers might have been on the field playing pass defense in the fourth quarter of that game. It's 52-7 at one point.
Okay, and I'm not
going to go to the UT Martin game to try to discuss Tennessee football.
And I'm not, I'm not here to knock Tennessee. I mean, they're number 1. I admit, they're absolutely number 1. They deserve that. But, I don't even think Alabama should be above TCU. And you know that I am not high on TCU right now.
I think they're better than TCU, but I don't think
that's my point.
I don't think what I believe should factor into my rankings or the college football playoff rankings. But I absolutely believe that if they played at a neutral site tomorrow, I may make a bank withdrawal.
I guess it kind of goes with your rankings don't necessarily mean who's the best team, because you got TCU at 2 on yours.
Yeah, I don't think they're the second best team in the country. I don't even know if they're the 7th best team in the country. But they've earned what they've earned. They have earned what they've earned.
And I see no legitimate argument for Bama being top 4. And you know what? They have a chance. They've got, LSU in Baton Rouge. They've got Ole Miss in Oxford. Then they've got the, SEC championship game. Should they win those 2 games? If they sweep those three, I mean, they'll win everything else. They should win the Iron Bowl without a problem. And they usually schedule a high school team before the Iron Bowl. So if they win those 3 major games I just mentioned, I'll give you a top 4. I'm good with that.
So I'm trying to pull you 2 together on this one. So Mike, you're saying there's no way Alabama's a top 4 team. Based on what they've done thus far, absolutely not. They've not earned a top 4 ranking. What do you think, DeReal?
Yeah, right now, Alabama, I wouldn't rank in the top 4. But if you ask me what are the 4 best teams in the country, Alabama is one of the 4 best teams in the country.
Yeah. And I guess the reason I disagree is that I don't think they're going to go unscathed the rest of the year. I don't think they are going to win at LSU. I don't think they're going to win at Ole Miss. And I don't think they're going – well, first of all, they don't win both those games. They're not making the SEC championship game.
Maybe I need to rephrase the way I'm saying it. Alabama could lose another game, okay? And in my opinion, Alabama's talent, coaching, and stuff still puts them as one of the 4 best teams. Being best and being deserved to be in the top 4 are 2 different discussions. So if you're saying Alabama doesn't deserve to be in the top 4 because of their record, that's fine, and their losses. But if you're saying talent-wise, coaching-wise, and all that stuff, are they one of the 4 best teams? Then it's yes. Like if Ohio State lost to Michigan, okay, and it's a close game. Well, I think most people would still think if they played again, Ohio State would beat Michigan. It's that type of thing.
I can, if you want to make that argument last year, but if we go into Columbus, into the horseshoe and beat them, there is no legitimate argument to be made that they are still better than us.
I need to see how the game plays out in order for that to be the case. What if Michigan or Ohio State leads the whole way, and then what Michigan State did to beat you all, where they get a blocked punt and return it in the end zone to win when they lead at the 0.000 second mark. And that's the only time they lead throughout the entire game. I need to see how the game's played first before making that judgment call.
It's in Columbus. I mean, that factors in. If we win by 1 point on, like I said, the all-time fluke is like some weird punt thing. If you go to Ohio State at Columbus and beat them, there is no argument they can make. Well, they're still the better. No.
So
not when everything's put into their favor.
I understand the real comment there about wanting to see but to Mike's point, if a fluke happens that causes Michigan to win, they still had to play close enough for that fluke to win the game. If they win 30-27 on a crazy tipped pass that bounces off 8 people they had to play within 1 score in Columbus to get to. So I wouldn't consider that a fluke. I would say Michigan, took advantage of a crazy play at the end, but they had to play for 60 minutes to put themselves right there.
Oh, yeah, Michigan deserves tons of credit for that. But the only thing I'm saying is if that series played out hypothetically 100 times, I think most people would choose Ohio State to win more than 50% of the games.
Well, I'm sure most people would think that because, the public perception has been that, we haven't quite hit the hill yet, and Ohio State is still, runs this conference. So, you know what, they're going to get the benefit of the doubt.
Mike, I'm going to stand up for your team for a bit. There's perception, I think, has affected the Ohio State Michigan this year more than any other game.
Oh, yeah.
Because I think based on the way they've played on the field, now I know Mark's had that video with the numbers, but I think just by eye test, I think Michigan has looked like the better football team this year.
I want to say that. The biggest argument I've made for why Michigan deserves to be a top 3 is that Michigan has never trailed in the fourth quarter. Ohio State was actually down to Penn State in the fourth quarter, and if it wasn't for a complete collapse in Happy Valley, Penn State wins that game. So I go by the fact that do we blow teams out? No, but that's not what we do. Harbaugh wants to have a bunch of 8-minute drives. He wants to win the time of possession 40-20. He wants to limit, you might get 7-8 possessions all game. So we're not going to win by 20 points. And I think, that was something, I kind of shared with you before is that, people think that if you don't win by, 4 touchdowns, you're not good. We're never going to win by 4 touchdowns. I mean, we beat Penn State by 24, and that's our big calling card. We were up on Iowa in Kinnick 20-0. But, with that defense, that's legit to me. And it's not like, we're going to get 12 possessions. Iowa, the reason why, Ohio State had the high scores that Iowa literally handed them the ball 6 times. I mean, they weren't like good forced turnovers. I mean, you had Spencer Petras just throw the ball right at red jerseys. So, that score is going to go high. So I agree with the fact that, the score doesn't always tell the story because we're not going to – this is not a team except for, when we played our high school teams at the beginning of the season. We're not going to put a 50-piece up on all these teams. It doesn't mean that, we're barely winning or we're not that good or anything like that.
Yeah, and as an example, I was more impressed with Michigan's win versus Iowa than Ohio State's win versus Iowa. I thought Michigan dominated for more time in the game than Ohio State did.
Yeah, I agree. It just looks bad because, like you said, you had Iowa just hand them 6 free possessions, whereas they weren't doing that with us. I don't know if it's the horseshoe curse or the fact they played better at Kinnick, or Petrus was just having a weird day, but they didn't give us all these free possessions like they did Ohio State. So yeah, I mean, if we had 6 freebies too, we might hit 40-45 points.
Right, and if something I'm worried about for Ohio State is their slow starts they've been going for the last few weeks. If they do that against Michigan, and Michigan gets out to a 14-zip lead, I could see Michigan chewing that clock out and just grinding the game to a halt to win a 21-17 type of game.
I don't think that game's going to I would say if the over-under was 55, I'd take the over. I think we can score on them, and I know they're going to. I mean, as great as our defense is, they're going to get their pound of flesh. Now, I do not think that Ohio State's running game. I think Travion Henderson's probably the worst running back they've had in a number of years. Now, Mayan Williams is decent, but Travion Henderson he's an average back at best, and I'll say that right now. I'm sure a lot of Ohio State fans are going to be against me. Having said that, what's that?
He's average.
He's an average running back.
Okay.
I mean, when you compare what they've had, they've had. If you want to compare to like Zeke Elliott and Maurice Clarett, and I can start naming J.K. Dobbins, they've had a number of stellar backs.
Yeah, those guys.
Travion Henderson doesn't hold a candle.
Backs in the nation, type guys.
Well, I mean, I can name just in this century from 2000, I can name 15, maybe 20 better running backs for Ohio State than Travion Henderson. In fact, Mayan Williams, I think, is a better running back.
Yeah, but see, Mike, the problem with that is even though they're better running backs they've had in the past, he's still probably a top 5 running back in college football.
I don't think he's a top 5 running back in our own conference.
Their wide receivers are awful, but they're probably, a top 15 unit in college football? Yeah. You're comparing Ohio State players to Ohio State players when you need to compare Ohio State running backs to this year's running back.
I would take Blake Corum from Michigan over him. I would take Brown from Illinois over him. I'd take Grant from Nebraska over him. I'd take Ibrahim from Minnesota over him right now. So, and then I would take Mayan over him. So that puts him at no better than 6th in the conference, not nationally, in the conference.
So, Darrell, we're going to bring some other folks in here to talk to Mike, and we'll kind of rotate.
Here we go.
Here. So, Darrell, you have anything else you want to point out?
Yes.
No, I'm just glad the 3-team SEC discussion didn't bring in any controversy at all, Mark. Anytime you bring up the 3-team SEC or the SEC being the best, everybody clearly just understands that. But it's all jokes. It's all fun. Good luck to everybody's team this week. And Mark, if you can bring an Ohio State fan just to bring the other side of the discussion, that would be nice.
Well, I'm here.
Well, so the host is an Ohio State fan. We don't need any more.
Yeah, but Mark is an Ohio State fan. But see, Mark isn't somebody who's going to go out on the table and say Ohio State's going to win 48-0.
Okay, nope. Yeah, that's true.
All right, man. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, no problem.
Hey, Mike. We got Yakov here. Yakov, how you doing today?
Hi, guys. Great to have you. Thank you for having me.
So here's our Ohio State-Michigan matchup. What did you want to bring to the table, Yakov?
Mark, admittedly, I when I called the show today, I wasn't yet ready to speak about Ohio State versus Michigan. But obviously, you are the host, and
you talk about whatever you want. We don't need to talk about Ohio State and Michigan.
Well, maybe I'll say something, but I actually wanted to first make a Big Ten comment, and then I can maybe say something Ohio State versus Michigan. Mark, I know you'd mentioned this before, but Illinois is going to win. In my opinion, they're going to beat Michigan State this weekend and win their 8th game. Looking at the rest of their schedule, they have Michigan State at home this week. Then again, it's Purdue. Tough game at Michigan, and then home Northwestern. I think they're going to win at least I think they're almost sure they're going to win 2 of those, which would make them 9-3 on the season, and possibly also win 3 of those games. We'll say give them the win at home at Purdue. Mark, I think that I know you're not into awards per se, but I'm going to put it a different way. I think that Brett Bielema, he is for sure the Big Ten Coach of the Year.
Oh yeah,
and I think he's as good as any candidate to be the national coach of the year.
Oh yeah, I stumped for him too.
Okay, well that was Mike. That was very. We have to argue about that one. I'm going to call him. I'm going to say if he wins, if they go 10-2, he's the national coach of the year.
I agree. I think Sonny Dykes might be a consideration over him, but Bielema is top 3 without question.
Consider that Bielema went 5-7 with Illinois last year, and he's done a phenomenal job. But Sonny Dykes also took over a program that went 5-7 last year, and are going to probably are going to be elevated beyond Illinois. So, no, it's a great point, Yakov. Bielema's done a phenomenal job. There's no question about that. Josh Heupel's also going to be considered because they went 7-6. He took over a program that won 3 games. Then he wins a bowl game or goes to a bowl game, goes 7-6, and now another leap.
Yeah, there's a lot of good candidates. Well, again, certainly going to call him the Big Ten coach of the year. That'll be easy. But the other one, he has some competition, but he's certainly an outstanding candidate for that.
Yep.
And I originally had Dino Babers, except Syracuse kind of fell off the cliff there for a second.
Having a decent year, but he's not going to be the coach of the year. But if they win 8 games, I'd say that's a decent year for. That's a good year at Syracuse.
Dino Babers, if that happens, would have the interesting kind of track record or resume as Syracuse as being, let's say, the ACC Coach of the Year. And I'm guessing he was the ACC Coach of the Year in 2018 when they went 10-3. And every other year at Syracuse, they've been awful. And he should be, I tell you, if he was going to have a bad season this year, I was calling for the guy. I don't know how he still has a job, actually.
Well, I think he's got a job. I think that one win they got against Clemson a few years back, I think that bought him a lot of time.
Yeah.
That Syracuse team was terrible.
It bought him 5 years. Yeah.
Gentlemen, I guess it could say we could call this an Ohio State, Michigan point here, even though it's really more of a general thing. I'm going to say from Ohio State point of view. Remember, Mark, yesterday, it was yesterday or 2 days ago, I had mentioned, I guess it would have been for the playoff rankings, that I felt that Ohio State should be given the benefit of the doubt and elevated as a result of scheduling Notre Dame this year. And of course, I didn't really elaborate on that. It was just a comment I made, and you made the point that you didn't want to give them or anyone credit for scheduling a game if that team turned out to not necessarily be a top team. Notre Dame's improving; they're not currently ranked, but they certainly will be if they win this weekend. But I might slightly push back on that, Mark.
Okay.
Here we'll compare Ohio State, Michigan as far as that goes. And again, I'm not putting down Michigan. I'm just going to say that obviously their conference schedule was poor.
Yeah.
And Ohio State's was better, even if
slightly.
Even if Notre Dame hasn't turned out to be as good as we thought. But obviously they went out on a limb and played. If they had played a MAC school there, that would have been an easy win.
Well, in my defense, UConn probably makes a bowl game this year.
They're doing that, but obviously,
I know what you're saying. But I just want to caveat
1 Power 5 program and then 2 whoever you want to play. Guaranteed home game wins. So Mark, I'll say what the difference should be, even though they're maybe not as good, but I'm going to say 2 historical points from Ohio State, Mark, why I think it should matter. In 2016, when Ohio State lost to Penn State, one of the main reasons they got in the playoffs because they beat Oklahoma, who was good that year. If that had been a MAC school, they had beat Miami 70-0. They probably would have made the playoffs that year. And last year, gentlemen, if Ohio State had played, I don't think they were one of the top 4 teams, but they had played a MAC school instead of Oregon and won that game, there's a good chance they would have been the 4th team over Cincinnati, just from brand name.
Obviously.
So I have to, Mark and Mike, I have to say that another thing I'll say for this year, I almost feel that, let's say they don't win against Michigan, and I feel like that Notre Dame game could be a potential get out of jail free, and at 11-1 make the playoffs over not an undefeated, but a 1-loss ACC and or Big 12 champion or Pac-12 champion, which already will be because everyone there has 1 loss. Whereas it might be that if Michigan comes out short in that game, they don't have that get out of jail free card, and then an 11-1 non-conference champ wouldn't. I think that probably would still be better than one-loss TCU or USC or Clemson, but because they played who they played, maybe they don't have that get out of jail free card, and therefore they would not get that fourth spot that the one-loss other conference champ would get that. You guys have anything to say about that?
Go ahead, Mike. Then I'll jump in.
I think that, like I said, I think that the Big Ten is clearly the second, in my opinion, the second best conference, which means that if Clemson or TCU run it, they're obvious. But I think
undefeated.
If either one of them loses one game, because then Clemson's going to probably play. Who's the best team in the Coastal? What, Carolina?
Yeah.
I don't think that's going to be like a wow, look at them kind of game.
It should be as much as one is beating Illinois.
Well, yeah, and our resume would be, we whooped the hell out of Penn State. We beat Illinois, and I'm not sure that's going to be one of those down the wire games. And then we'll say we go to Columbus and lose close. Now if we get just blown apart, that's another conversation altogether. But I think, if we have those two wins that are very quality wins, probably going to end up being top 20, possibly top 15 wins at the end of the season, because I don't think Illinois is going to lose another game, and I don't think Penn State is either. And we'll have wins against Iowa, which their offense is terrible, but they have a great defense, and they're not at Kinnick is not a terrible win. We have a win against Maryland. They're 6-2 right now. Nobody's talking about them. Meanwhile, you got ACC, which, like I said, I think they're down. In fact, I see a lot of people in the chat saying the ACC is the worst conference. I think it's the Big 12, but I see a lot of people saying the ACC is the worst conference of the Power Five, and I really don't have a good argument against that. So I don't think that a one-loss Clemson that actually does win their conference should be put against Michigan. I know the committee is not going to see it that way.
Well, if we're being objective about it, the ACC has better non-conference wins than the Big Ten does.
And I do know that, we made the argument earlier, the ACC, Boston College is terrible. Virginia Tech is terrible. Virginia is terrible. Miami's been a massive disappointment. I think a lot of people are a little high on Florida State. I'm not seeing it. I think a lot of that just came from the first week where they kind of lucked their way through.
The conference has played better out of conference than the Big Ten has. It's not even that debatable.
Mark, you said you obviously Mike made his point there, but you said you wanted to also chime in about if you want to use that comment, get out jail free for playing Notre Dame as opposed to playing three group of lower level group of five schools.
Well, let's see how Notre Dame finishes. If Notre Dame,
I guess I was willing to
and they beat USC. I don't think that a team should be given any kind of scheduling credit based on intent. I will give Ohio State credit for scheduling Notre Dame. I think fans can give recognition to programs that go out there and schedule difficult games, but if they don't turn out to be difficult games, we can only evaluate the teams based on not the intent of the schedule, but what it actually turned out to be. And to date, the Notre Dame game is now a decent win. It's an okay win. It's a top 40 win, but it's not a top 5 to 10 win, and it shouldn't be credited as such because Notre Dame's not a top 5 to 10 team in the nation. So that would be like if somebody has Alabama on its schedule next season, and Alabama turns out to be a 2-10 team. Well, they shouldn't be given credit for beating an Alabama national championship contending team when they're beating a new version of Alabama, a 2-10 Alabama.
Mark, I remember you had the Michigan podcaster, I think it's Jason Rowe or so. He once made the comment that, and he said he's going to die on the hill that he said for Michigan they don't need to play anyone good. The playing their out of conference schedule that they had was fine. So I guess if we go to that, then really next year just schedule 3 MAC schools, win them all, and as long as you lose 1 or no games in the Big Ten, that's fine.
No, that's not also what I'm not saying that. Yeah,
Well,
I don't think you're
I guess
understanding what I'm saying.
I'm giving
Why would
someone.
we give Ohio State or anybody else credit for beating a really good team when they didn't beat a really good team? We could do the same thing with look at their conference games. We could say, you know what? Wisconsin's no good this year,
Yeah.
but they usually are. So let's give Ohio State a lot of credit for beating Wisconsin. Well, no,
Well,
Wisconsin's not good
Yeah.
this year.
those 9 games, you don't have a choice. You only
I
have choice.
understand, but even if Ohio State went out and they scheduled, let's say this was their non-conference schedule this year, Notre Dame, Texas A&M, and Miami, we'd all be blown away the entire offseason going, Ohio State's amazing. They don't care. They'll schedule anyone. They went out and scheduled Miami, Texas A&M, and Notre Dame. Well, you know what happened? Texas A&M sucks, and so does Miami. So too bad. It's not a good schedule.
that has happened a lot though, because I remember a lot of times, we got credit, and I hated this, where we'd get credit because we always played when we played Notre Dame. We always played them the first 2 weeks of the season, and Notre Dame, they're going to have a top 10 ranking every year. They could go 3-9 the previous year, 3-8 the previous year. They're going to be top 10
actually
next
been
year.
disproven. But go ahead, Mike.
But there's been a lot of times where we beat a top 10 Notre Dame that turns out to be terrible. Yeah. And it leads them to kind of think that, we're better than we really are. And that leads to,
Mark,
I did. This is the last thing I'll say, and we'll let Mike go and we'll get somebody else on here. Yeah. Is that I understand people out there think Notre Dame's overrated, but it's actually been proven that they're not overrated. Like I've seen lists where people have compiled the AP preseason ranking to show that they're not. That they've outplayed their ranking as many times as they've underachieved against their preseason ranking.
I don't know how, because they get a great ranking every year. Like at the beginning of the season.
I'm just telling you, Mike, go to the AP rankings over the last 20 or 25 years and see where Notre Dame was ranked preseason and postseason, and you won't see anything egregious.
Okay, well, let's put this. This year, when you went into the season week 0, did you think Notre Dame was a top 5 team?
No.
Yeah, I didn't either.
No.
And that happens way too much. It happens a lot more than it should.
And I get your point, Mike, because I would have said the same thing. But then I saw the numbers and I'm saying, well, they're being fairly ranked in the preseason. Okay, Yakla, or Mike, anything else?
Nope. I'll go ahead and pass the torch.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Mark, should I let you go? Are you going to let me go as well?
No, we're gonna bring somebody else in if you want to stay. We got David. Maybe we've got 3 Buckeyes fans here.
Oh. Hey, you know what? I want to get in there and start quoting some average Ohio State running backs, because I've seen average Ohio State running backs. Daniel Boom-Herron is average. Mike Weber is average.
Well, that's the year I was going to go to, David.
Right.
I'm sorry to cut you off. I was going to go to 2016 immediately and say, okay.
Mike, by the way. I'm sorry Trey Henderson isn't one of the by the way, you compared him to 2 of the 5 greatest running backs in the history of Ohio State, and J.K. Dobbins and Zeke Elliott. If you want me to say that Trey Henderson isn't going to be one of the top 5 running backs in the history of Ohio State, I'll concede that point. But that doesn't mean that he isn't still above average. He had 1,248 yards last year and averaged 7 yards a carry. That's slightly above average. And he's still averaging right around 6 yards a carry this year. That's slightly above average. I'll take him over Grant from Nebraska any day of the week and twice on Sunday.
Absolutely.
So
me as well.
But that's neither here nor there. I will say this. As far as the rankings go, I think that Clemson is, and we talked about this once before, is getting ranked way too high based on reputation. This is not your older brother's Clemson team. Joel Klatt was talking about this a little bit the other day with Colin Cowherd, and I find it to be unfortunate, Mark. I mean, do you think that this is just the bottom line, a reputation rank for Clemson?
No, not if you look at the wins and losses. Now, if you're watching them play and you put more weight into how they're playing against that schedule, yeah, I can agree that they've not looked extremely good. But
okay.
But their 4 wins, their best 4 wins are better than Michigan's.
Where were we saying? Wake Forest, NC State,
Florida State and Syracuse.
Florida State and Syracuse is going to be better than what? Maryland, Penn State, and
Iowa. And yeah.
Okay.
Well,
Yeah. After that, it's what? Sparty or
Michigan State.
Yeah. Michigan State.
Yeah. Okay.
But I get your point. I said that to one of the previous callers. I believe Michigan's a better football team than Clemson, but I bet Clemson ranked higher too, because to me they've got a better resume.
Yeah, to be fair, and that's where I was going with that. I would rank them higher. I just want to stipulate that right now. I would say that. I did also want to ask you about the games this week, by the way. What is your early vibe on LSU and Alabama? I'm looking at the line at 13.5, and I know Alabama's had their struggles this year. But remember, I keep on hearkening back to the fact that Alabama had their struggles last year. They had close games at Florida. They had a close game against LSU last year. They had a close game against Arkansas last year. They obviously barely escaped Auburn. They lost to Texas A&M. All of that being known, I just wonder if this is a game where Alabama could explode.
Well, I will tell everybody out there, if they want to hear an excellent conversation, I'll shamelessly plug this. We had Matt Moscona on from ESPN Radio Baton Rouge.
Yeah.
And that was really good conversation. Matt's phenomenal. And not a whole lot of people are watching that video. I can never come up with the secret formula of putting content into views. But anyway, so I think that Alabama's secondary has struggled this year, but Eli Ricks did not play much of that. He's only been on the field the last couple of weeks, so he's added addition, a huge addition. He's their number one corner, and so he's playing well, and that's going to be a tremendous matchup because LSU, Jaden Daniels holds the key to much of this, of course, because he's not an elite quarterback every week, but he can be an elite quarterback on occasion.
He's played really well the last 2 weeks. I've looked at the numbers are impressive against Ole Miss and Florida.
11 touchdowns.
Yeah, he's looked really good. He's only thrown 1 interception this year, so he's actually, for the most part, taking care of the football, it looks like.
Yeah, for some reason, I'm just feeling in that game that if Alabama wins, they're going to win it with a drive and with a field goal in the less than a minute left in the game, or LSU is going to be on the move and come up short.
You got a close one, huh?
I see. Well, if Alabama wins, I think they're going to win by a small amount, I should say. For some reason, maybe it's just my heart, but I can see. I guess I can see LSU, up by 10, and we get to experience the roar of the night crowd at Death Valley and enjoy the last couple of minutes of hearing that deafening noise, and then knowing they're going to win the game with 5-6 minutes left to go. Not by 14 or 18, but 10 points, something like that, 13 points.
Maybe
that's what I'm thinking, gentlemen.
Maybe take the minus 13.5, huh, Mark?
I think that the talent level and the ability of these two teams in some ways mirrors the situation of Ohio State going to Penn State. I think LSU's really good, just like Penn State. They're at home. Big home field advantage. Yeah. But I think that separation's pretty similar.
It may take toward the fourth quarter for that to materialize, similar to Penn State.
Possibly.
Yeah. I could see Jahmyr Gibbs popping a couple of big plays in the fourth quarter and then Alabama pulling away. By the way, candidate for the most, our buddy Zach Smith was saying the most exciting player in college football.
Jahmyr Gibbs.
Jahmyr Gibbs.
Yeah.
Every time I watch Alabama, he always seems to pop off a big play.
I heard him compared to Alvin Kamara, and I thought that was an apt comparison.
Yeah, he's really good. By the way, tougher game for Alabama this week or next week at Ole Miss? Gut feeling, Mark.
This week.
Okay. Yeah, Cuff, what do you think?
I guess if I have to choose, I have to go with the home crowd at Death Valley. Which, by the way, I was on the 50-yard line in 1990, but it wasn't during a football game. Though. It actually was. My family went there. My dad went to a medical conference. We got to go to an LSU basketball game when Shaq and Shaquille O'Neal was playing there.
Oh, nice.
I walked out in the field. I guess it would have been February, March. It's a great-looking stadium, but there was no one there. Just me.
Yeah, do you have a parting shot?
Yeah, I think Ohio State's gonna win this weekend.
Okay.
I'm joking, but I don't know.
Thanks, Yakov.
Love your boldness, Yakov.
Appreciate you being here.
I went out on a limb, gentlemen. Thank you.
There you go.
Good to meet you, David.
Take care. Good to meet you.
All right. You ready for this one, David? We're going to keep you here, and we'll bring in Michigan fan Ben.
Hey, I called in because I'm here to talk about this LSU thing that Real brought up and Mark defended, and I do not buy it at all. Why do we play the games? Why do we play the games if we're just gonna? Hey, we're gonna go by supposed talent. Then why do we even play the games?
No. I can't defend the committee. I'll defend myself. I rank the teams based on the resume.
Okay. How do we have LSU at 10? I do not see it. Above 10? If you rank them above 10, I don't know how. I don't see how it's. I don't see it. I can't.
Well, they beat Ole Miss by 25 points.
Ole Miss, what's their biggest? What's Ole Miss's other biggest win? Kentucky.
Are we going to play this? Do you want to play this game?
I mean, we can because
all right.
all
right. We can play this game. Who's Michigan beat?
Okay, who's Michigan beat?
Yeah,
Michigan's beat Penn State. So that's Michigan's
that's obviously their best win, right?
But how many losses does Michigan have?
Who's Penn State beat?
But how many losses has Michigan
have? I will get to that in just a second. Who's Penn State beat?
Penn State has beaten Minnesota. They've beaten Purdue.
Okay, yeah.
Those are the biggest. Purdue's probably the biggest one.
Yeah. Okay. It's similar to what you're giving me with Ole Miss, beating Texas A&M and Georgia Tech and Kentucky.
Yeah, I mean exactly. But look at where Ole Miss is placed. Penn State, Ole Miss hasn't played even the committee gives Michigan and Ohio State's the number 2 team.
Yeah.
Michigan's the number 5, and Penn State lost. Those are Penn State's losses. So do losses not? I mean, who you lose to doesn't make a difference. I mean, even as far as comparing Penn State and Ole Miss.
I just want to make this point, Mark. I'll throw this out there. What do we think Ole Miss is? When LSU beat them, aren't they a legitimate top 10 team? Or you just didn't think Ole Miss was a legitimate top 10 team?
I personally don't think they're quite that good, but they're a really good team. They're a top 15 to 20 team.
Okay.
And LSU blew them out.
And then they beat Mississippi State. What's Mississippi State? A top 25 to top 30 team?
Yep.
Okay. And then their losses to the number 1 team in the country, they got thumped. And then they do have a bad loss, which was basically the first game of the year by 1 point in what was essentially a home game. Yeah. I'm tending to think that LSU is more like a top 15 team, but I think that's a little bit too high for my blood. I would say that.
Okay.
What do you think?
Well, I think my friend Florida team that was good enough to beat Utah.
Okay.
As well. So.
I mean, I just can't. I mean, I don't see crediting LSU for their win against Ole Miss. I guess that has to be their valued win. I mean, that's it.
And Mississippi State. If you're going to credit like Michigan with beating Maryland, then you got to credit LSU with beating Mississippi State.
But this is the thing. I'm not comparing Michigan. I mean, you can compare. I mean, Michigan has 0 losses, though. I mean, there's a whole different thing.
Absolutely. But what I'm pointing out is that there are very few impressive wins if we take wins to some elite level. Like, people are looking for these great wins that everybody has, and there aren't many of those. Teams are beating. There are, I pointed this out when I posted my top 25. There are 42 teams in the country that are either 5-3 or 6-2. 42.
Right.
Yeah.
We could have a top 60 and you could barely fit all of them in.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's a good, I like that point. I mean, it's a good point, but I just think, like, if you take LSU and you put, like, for instance, I don't think, like, LSU got not beat as bad by Tennessee as Oregon got beat by Georgia. But if you slap that same loss, that 40-13 loss on Oregon to Georgia, you would just say that, and then you put another loss anywhere, there's no way Oregon, no matter how well they played, is going to hit that level 10. They're not going to hit the 10 spot. I'm sorry. It's just not going to happen. And that's where I think it's really I mean, and that's why I agree with what they're saying over in the Pac-12 channel. That's just not going to happen. LSU is getting a bump just because they're LSU.
I think they put a lot of weight into the Ole Miss win, and I think the Mississippi State win. And I think they said that their loss was not that bad because they lost to the number one team in the country. But I have a problem with them having that second loss. That's what I keep coming back to, because that Florida State game, that first game of although it was the first game of the year, it was only 1 point. It's still, that Florida State team is pretty average.
That is one thing too. Another thing, though, I have seen over the years, and this is a side point, and I see it playing time and again. A loss at the beginning of the year does not hurt you near as bad as a loss towards the end of the year.
Yeah. And I can respect either approach, because I think some people just say, hey, the resume is the resume, and every game should count the same because it turns out to be a 12-game resume. And if you're 10-2, you're 10-2, whatever the record is, versus some people that weight it more as, we want to wind up with the 4 best teams in the country. So those 4 best teams are the teams that are playing in December, and we want to arrive at the 4 best that are playing right then. And so something that happened on September 3rd, we're going to discount that to a certain extent. It's obviously on their record, but a team could be much different 2 months later, 3 months later.
Hey, Mark, last thing I wanted to throw out, I know you got other callers, but I wanted to throw this out there. I know we talked about the Georgia-Tennessee game. I just want to get into a little bit more depth with you real quick on it. I get the same vibe on this game that I kind of got on the UCLA-Oregon game, where I think UCLA came into that game with definitely the better quarterback with the way DTR is playing. Mm-hmm. And I really love the way Hooker's playing right now, as good or better than any quarterback in the country.
Yep.
And I love Tennessee's wide receivers. They've got Hyatt. They're getting back Tillman this week.
Yeah.
But I keep coming back to the fact that much like how I felt that Oregon had the better overall roster and they're playing at home, I'm leaning Georgia because I think Georgia has obviously the better overall roster and they're playing at home. What do you think about that comparison?
Yeah, I didn't think of that comparison, but I have thought of everything else that you mentioned there in terms of comparing the two teams. That, yeah, I do really love what's going on in Tennessee. I think that they are nearly as good as people are giving them credit for. They're not the best teams in the country. I don't think. I may be proven wrong. I don't think they're quite that good. I think they're on the fringe of the top 5. And the defense keeps getting better and better and better, and may be able to support, a 40-point effort on offense with, holding Georgia in the mid-30s to win the game. But
well, that's the point I was making. And, obviously we're going to get into this once we get a chance to talk Ohio State, Michigan. But
I want to throw something at you, David.
We got plenty of weeks to get into that. So we got time here, my friend. But the bottom line is if you have a number one offense, I mean, what was 2018 Clemson? What was, 2019? Well, 2018 Clemson did have a really good defensive line. But, I mean, you think of the teams that won in 2018, 2019, and 2020 were offensive-oriented teams. Georgia was really an outlier last year. And I still wonder to this day if Jamison Williams doesn't get hurt if Alabama wins that game. Because remember, Bryce Young won the Heisman in Atlanta by lighting up Georgia's defense like a Christmas tree.
Sure.
And I still wonder how Georgia's defense looks against the big-time passing game. By the way, my friend up north, something to think of, by the way, something for my friend up north to think about come late November, what his defense looks like once they meet a big-time passing game.
Well, hey, I've already seen your team play against decent defense, and they didn't fare too well.
44
we'll see how that goes. Yeah, it took them a while, but Michigan's not going to give you that much time of possession that these other teams did. But anyways, let me throw this at you. Let me ask both you and Mark. I want to throw this at you.
Shoot.
And this I'm going to let my bias of Michigan just flow through here.
Okay.
I think Michigan could be the best team in the nation this year. And I think they have the possibility, and maybe they haven't shown it yet, but I think they have the possibility they have a higher ceiling, I think, than any of the teams that we have seen. What do you guys think? I think our offense has not shown its full capability.
And
I think only other team that I think might actually have a area where they are still expanding is Ohio State. I think their defense is still progressing in a fact they haven't shown us everything.
Mark, do you want to go first?
Well, I'll say that I believe that Michigan's playing better than Ohio State right now. So I'll agree with that. I don't know that they have the highest ceiling in the country. I think Ohio State, Georgia, and Alabama still have the highest ceilings in the country. But I get your point because basically Michigan's winning these games comfortably, running the ball and throwing 20 times and playing great defense. And especially the pass rush has been really consistent from a lot of different players. And in addition to that, you got to think, okay, we keep hearing, and it's been proven last season how good the wide receivers are, but they haven't been utilized and needed. So can they take the top off the defense? And if they get into that kind of game and be explosive, and I believe they have it in them, they haven't proven it. They haven't been pushed to prove it.
Let me add this data point. I think you guys are going to find this really interesting. I think both teams' last game before the game is going to be an interesting game for both teams for obvious reasons. And I'll tell you why. I think, especially if little Tua plays for Maryland, and with the type of receivers that Maryland had, I've said this before to Mark, I like pretty much everything about Ohio State's defense with the exception of their corners right now. I like their defensive line. We found a star this weekend in JTT. I like our linebacker play, and I really like our safeties. I'll say this, though. Maryland was the one team before the year, because their receivers can play. Demas and Jarrett are really good. Little Tua's got some capability because he's got some talent. I want to see how we fare in pass defense that week. From your guys' perspective up north, I want to see how much that Illinois defense can challenge your running game and force J.J. McCarthy to complete a pass further than 10 yards.
Yeah.
And, can you generate some chunk plays in your passing game?
And my other thing is, I'm wondering if they're going to go into that game and still just pound the ball down Illinois' throat. And if I see them just pound the ball down Illinois' throat and just continue to just beat them up like they have everyone else, then I would be really, really worried as an Ohio State fan to come play that team.
I would say this one last point. Ron Jaworski used to make this point all the time. I thought it was a very good one. Eventually, you can't hide your quarterback. Your quarterback's going to have to come to the party and make some plays. Mm-hmm. Even Stetson Bennett last year had to make plays in that playoff run for Georgia. I'll make that point. I think it's a good point, by the way.
I don't think they have to hide JJ McCarthy. I think they're just playing the game that they want to play. Okay. I don't think at one time they have been forced to play anything other than the game they want to play. I think the only time they even let loose a little bit was at the end of the Michigan State game when they're like, hey, we're going to just put some points on the board, and they failed to do so. And that was my only really disappointing part. I mean, that was other than being bad in the red zone, and we're going to have to work on that. But I think that is going to be fixed, at least to some degree. I have seen Ohio State, when I compare the two, I have seen Ohio State not be able to play the game that they want to play multiple times. So I think there's a little bit of a, we haven't seen Michigan in this position where they were actually really threatened, where they were like, okay, we have to get something figured out here.
I think come late November we'll get it all sorted out.
I can't. Well, it's going to be it's going to be great.
Yeah. Well, that week on Mark Rogers is going to be.
I'll tell you this, guys, but I do not. If we lose, I don't take losses. Well, you won't see me if we lose. If we lose, the only way you're going to see me is if I'm complaining about the referee. Then you might see me come on and complain about something.
We can't have you on that night.
Yeah.
If we lose, you don't want me on that night. I'll be a broken soul.
Maybe the next day. Maybe we'll do
I'll be depressed.
Call in the next day.
Have Michigan fans ever complained about refereeing in Columbus before, Mark?
Yeah.
I brought that up.
A 1 and a 6 come to mind.
Hey, when your own coach thinks they lost and it's called the other way, I mean, we have reason to complain.
Well, hey, don't turn the ball over, and maybe, your quarterback had a busted up shoulder and couldn't complete a pass from here to there. Maybe that didn't exactly help the cause.
Can't complete a pass when he's being pulled when you're being pulled to the ground.
Ben, when was this ever stated by the other coach?
Oh, I just seen it I just seen it last year. He was talking about it. I seen an interview with him, and he was like, he actually did the same Harbaugh thing where he's like, man, I thought we had lost it. Yeah. Urban Meyer definitely said that.
I haven't seen that quote.
They were both on the other side. Yeah, no, I'll find it. I'll link it in the chat. I'll try to find it. I seen it. I was watching a football game, and Urban Meyer was talking. He was on one of the shows, and it showed him talking about that game.
Yeah, I'd have to see Urban admitting that. I
was surprised.
Leaving.
I actually started liking Urban a little bit more then.
Yeah. Was it stated in a way like, I saw the measurement and I saw him not get there and I thought we lost it, or just kind of like?
No, he thought he lost. No, when he looked at it, he thought he was talking about when he was going through the game. He's like, "Oh, I thought we lost," and that's kind of the way he stated it, the way you mentioned it.
All right,
I lived through 2019 Clemson. That was not pretty.
But I don't care about that part. That was a close call, with that one. I'm not going to complain about that call. All right, guys.
See you in late November.
Yeah, I can't wait.
Man.
Yep. Bye-bye.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Dave. We'll keep it moving. I guess we'll continue with the tandems. We got LBC Trojan Rick here, and we got John on the line. I don't know what you guys want to talk about, but we'll let Rick start us off.
Good evening, Mark. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you, sir?
All right. I'm sitting in the back room there. I got a little preview of Ohio State, Michigan.
Yes, you did.
Something to look forward to in the year 2024.
Yes,
but
absolutely.
But in the meantime, I understand there was some discussion going on about what I said or I didn't say. And I thought I'd call and defend myself for some comments that were made on the Pac-12 show.
Yeah, I didn't bring it up. DeReal was on.
You're right.
LSU was brought up during the show.
Correct.
And you guys had made comments about, and when I say, I don't know exactly who, whether it was you.
I did the breakdown.
Whoever made what comments about LSU being overranked, and that was pretty much it.
I explained myself.
Yes.
But you had mentioned that somebody had said that there were 5 or 6 or 7 teams in the Pac-12 that could beat LSU. That was never said.
Okay.
So I
I
went
remember something being stated about just a litany of teams were listed or something about.
No, I went through the resume.
Yes.
And I just found that it was surprising based on LSU's record this year. And I know DeReal liked to, he was bringing up previous years and validating his point that the SEC is the best conference. You're not going to get any debate from me. What I was focusing in on was the playoff committee and the rankings, the way the rankings came out. And it was very surprising that LSU was at number 10.
Yep.
That was something that surprised me on your show on Tuesday night when we came on, and Tony revealed the breakdown of our Patreon 12-team playoff. And the one team that we didn't have on there in our top 12 was LSU. So I did a little research after, and I looked at their resume, and we all know they lost that first game, which was basically, as was stated earlier, it's like a home game, and they were playing in New Orleans against a team, FSU, who's not ranked. They're 5-3. So when they lost, when they beat Auburn 21-17 at Auburn, which is a game they struggled in, would you agree?
Absolutely.
Okay, at that point, that was their first road game, true road game. That put them at 4-1, and they were ranked number 25 at the time. And then they played Tennessee and they got blown out. Okay, and they were unranked the next week. And they went and beat Florida at Florida, which is a good win. When you go to the Swamp, that's a good win. It's 45-35. They beat them. And they went ahead and they beat Ole Miss, a great win, 25-20. So they have one win versus a college football playoff ranking top 25.
It was 45-20.
Yeah, they beat them by 20.
I'm sorry, 45-20 by 25 points. And so they jumped up in the AP to 15 and college, the coaches poll to 17. So the college football rankings had them at 10.
Yep.
At 6-2. So you go from unranked and you've got a great win. You have one win against a top 25 team, and Ole Miss doesn't have a win versus a top 25 team.
Yeah, but let's not confuse what the committee's doing versus what the AP and the coaches polls are doing.
Oh, I totally get it. And in LSU, if they beat Alabama, that'll be, I mean, they're going to justify their ranking, but I'm just looking at their resume now, not what they have down the road.
Sure, of course.
Yeah. And so I understand there's differences, but when you have a team that is that much of a difference, it's just kind of curious because here they are playing Alabama. And I basically called it a speed, they're bumpers. So they're there to protect the top 3 SEC teams. And they also give an opportunity to Ole Miss and LSU, should they prove themselves, to just replace Alabama and position those SEC teams for a chance at 3 teams in the playoff. And you know what? If there's a conference that can do it, they can do it. I'm not debating that at all. But this is a game we've seen. It's a shell game. It's basically a shell game. When you have, you can't tell me that LSU is number 10 and Ole Miss is number 11. I just don't see it. Now, I'm not saying any of these other Pac-12 teams are better than these teams. I didn't say that at all. I just said what we're seeing from the committee is stuff that we've seen all the time before. Because
I thought UCLA was number 11. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No, I'm sorry, John. I've been talking the whole time. No, UCLA is number 12.
Okay.
And so, and one of the things we have, Mark, is that and you'd mentioned before, is that you got to take the bias out. You have challenges with that. Everybody has challenges with that. So does the committee. And rightly so, the Pac-12 has been a horrible conference. I am the first to admit that for a number of reasons. And that's due to the Pac-12 itself. A number of different fronts, from Larry Scott to a bad TV deal to lousy time slots. And it just keeps on getting worse and worse. And so, you know what? I get it, because nobody wants to see our games. Nobody talks about our games. But now they have to talk about the games because a Washington and a Washington State beat 2 Big Ten teams in the out of conference. That is position them to be bowl eligible, or at least Washington. Washington State still or soon will be. Oregon State's a quality team. So I get it that nobody talks about these teams, but you got to look at this year, and the Pac-12 has some solid teams. So all I did was laid out how I just found that LSU, and John can speak to it. He could speak about his Tigers, but here's the thing too, is that Jaden Daniels is a consistently inconsistent average quarterback in the Pac-12, and he goes to LSU.
He was also on a lousy team, though.
Well, you know what? But how come he couldn't play well? Because, like you said, John, it's a powder puff conference. I mean, you're on a lousy team and you're a good quarterback.
He was pretty outstanding as a freshman,
but he regressed. And here's the thing: SEC, we've been led to believe they're bigger.
So hang on. Let me stop you right there.
Okay.
So in your mind, it's this massive conspiracy. Hang on, man. I let you talk. Now let me talk.
Go ahead.
It's this massive conspiracy by the media, the NFL, and every major high school recruiting service to put the SEC at the top. Is that really your contention? Because that sounds like nonsense to me.
Well, based on what I said, if that's how you're going to translate it, I can't choose your words, John. So
okay, what are you saying then? I mean, you're trying to insinuate that the Pac-12 is a better defensive league than the SEC, based strictly on Jaden Daniels' performance at Arizona State and LSU. Correct? That's what you were trying to do, right?
What did I didn't say that. I didn't say that at all.
I said insinuate.
No, I didn't say that.
You okay? What are you saying then?
That's how you're translating it. I'm just saying that we've seen Jaden Daniels, okay, and he's going to a better conference with bigger. I was going to say that, but you jumped in. He goes to a better conference. SEC has bigger defensive players. They're faster. They're superior. Okay. Am I getting that correct? Please tell me.
Sure. Yeah. I mean,
they are a tremendous conference. And so Jaden Daniels was an average quarterback in a powder puff Pac-12 conference. Those are your words. Is that correct? Is that correct?
Yes.
No, yes. I don't want to misconstrue anything, John. Okay.
No, it's just I mostly say that to get under y'all's skin,
Exactly. Hey, that's what college football is about. You're in Mississippi, your team's in Baton Rouge. I'm out here with the fruits and nuts in Southern California. I get it, man. I get it back from 2003, brother. So what I'm trying to say is, yes, we've been conditioned to that. And so what you saw with Jaden Daniels is you saw inconsistency in that first game. Granted, that was his first game, new coach, all that kind of stuff. I give him a pass on that, right? But what you saw with Jaden Daniels at Tennessee is that's the inconsistency, all right? And he's going to have a tough time this weekend.
He was also still kind of piecing it together. He wasn't taking shots downfield yet. He started taking shots downfield in the Florida game the next week, and it really, really loosened up the offense a lot. It opened up the running game a lot more. It opened up him being able to scramble more. It would just, it did wonders for our offense. Now, will it translate against Alabama? Who knows? But it's working for now.
Correct.
Can I jump in with a point, which
Absolutely.
would be, I respect, Rick, what you're doing here, and it's what I attempt to do. And again, I don't do it perfectly. I don't do it flawlessly. I try to repeat that every time I unveil a top 25 or do anything else of that's my attempt. That's what I'm striving for the results, and beyond the results, the performance, because I believe we can agree that we want to evaluate teams not just, okay, they're 5-0, they're 5-0, but they're 5-0. And in addition to playing more difficult opponents, they dominated them. And we're going to give more value to a 50-0 win over the same team as versus a 28-27 win against that same team. So we're weighing all those things to try to get the resumes right and the evaluation of the resumes right. John, I believe your frustration, and maybe that's a bad term, your perspective on this is, in your heart that the SEC is the best conference. And as I stated to the first caller tonight, I believe that the SEC is the best conference. But if we strictly look at just this year's results, I think the SEC has a slight, like if we could just put blinders on and just forget everything we know about who's going to play in the NFL and who had the top 300 commits in the recruiting class and all that, and just watch the games, look at the metrics, look at the results and the performance on the field, the SEC's probably played better than anybody this season, but it's close. It's really muddled between the various conferences. Just looking at non-conference play, and that's what Rick's attempting to do, is just say, hey, what's happened on the field this season that tells us who's really deserving of their rankings and who's not.
Okay, I mean that's fair. I really couldn't or wouldn't want to put up much of a counter argument against that.
And John, the only thing I'll add to that real quick is the comment I made to a few callers back. And I understand this point. If the SEC has been better than everybody year after year after year after year after year after year, why wouldn't they be this year, especially since there's been nothing to push back on that evidence or negate that evidence? But just again, this particular season's evidence doesn't really prove that definitively.
Well, the I don't know how much it's affecting the SEC, but the super seniors are still kind of a wrench in the gears there. I think, and that's why games are closer, and there's probably a few more upsets here and there. It's because you have so many more teams that have so many more players that have that extra year of maturity and experience on them. No one cares to jump in?
Well, I think it's kind of the college basketball effect to a certain extent that we see, and I'm no college basketball expert, but I did cover it for a long, long time, but haven't for a long, long time, is that, yes, those senior laden teams in the NCAA tournament may not be as talented as some of the teams that they're knocking out, but they've played together, they're cohesive, and now because of, the pandemic, rules and guidelines have been in play, the SEC is going to have more. I don't know if it's significant. I don't know if it's much of a factor, but it's got to be a slight factor. Has had more players move on to the NFL, and the other conferences, again, probably to a small degree, has had more players stick around to say, yeah, I'll take that 6th year. I'll take that 7th year than the SEC. Is that the point you're making?
Yeah, that's more or less what I was saying.
I think John brings up a good point, because we're going to look back at this year 5 years from now, and we're going to try to analyze it. And I think a lot of what makes this year unique is there's been a big reset in college football with the transfer portal, NIL, all the coaches that moved in the offseason. Look at LSU. They pick up Jaden Daniels. Look at all the transfer quarterbacks and some schools have been successful in changing culture. Some have not. And so that plays into a big difference. Look at, Bo Nix leaves the SEC. He goes to Oregon, and he's really got Oregon rolling. And, that's a whole new coaching staff. So perfect example, USC. I think you'd mentioned, Mark, that, hey, Utah went and lost to Florida at the Swamp. and then USC lost to Utah at Rice Eccles. That's not really comparable because Utah is a different team when they play away from Utah. And so, yes, I mean, you can look at it like, wow, Florida beat Utah and Utah beat USC. The average fan's you can't really compare that.
No,
well, I mean, I definitely don't believe in transitive property, but at the same time, that's really not a good look for USC, especially to the committee.
I tend to disagree with that because if you put Florida at Rice Eccles, it would be a totally different game. And
perhaps,
but we don't conjecture though, Rick. But
we don't even have any history really to take a look at. How many times has Florida traveled outside?
They don't have to travel.
30 years.
They have a bunch of average to good teams, or just fairly average teams in Florida and UCF and FIU and all those other little schools. They don't have to travel. Why in the world would they want to pad their athletic department budgets bills with all these heavy, gaudy travel expenses when they don't have to? It's kind of a nonsense argument.
That's where you kind of speak out both sides of your mouth if you're the SEC. It's like, why do we want to have these extra bills when we make all of this money? Now we're
just because you have money doesn't mean you have to spend it. Texas A&M can afford to buy out Jimbo Fisher. Doesn't mean they're going to.
You know what? This is a great argument for another show, and I don't want to get off topic here, but I mean, I'll just leave it at that. But if the average fan, the voters are not average fans. They know the difference, and but that's fine. Because USC is not a playoff team. I'm not here to say they are. We are not a playoff team, and if they want to go ahead and hold that 1 point loss, and is a bad loss, so be it. That's cool with me. But it's not.
I mean, you guys still have to play. If you're gonna make the Pac-12 championship game, who else do you have to play? Like, who's left on the schedule?
We got to beat UCLA on the 19th.
On the 19th, and then you have to probably play Oregon in the championship game, right?
It could be Oregon. It could be Utah. So we'll see.
Okay. Those are going to be both rough for USC, I think. Can we switch gears here a little bit?
Sure.
I want to talk about all the pity that's being laid on TCU, and I just want everyone to like really think about this. Everyone a lot of people are saying TCU deserves to get in if they go as an undefeated Big 12 champ, and I strongly disagree, and here's why. Look at the top 10.
Yeah.
Name one team that TCU would be favored against by Vegas.
Really? We're going to go there, John? You're going to use Vegas to justify a playoff decision.
I mean, a lot of those lines would be really gaudy.
Let's not play any of the games. We can save these kids, all sorts of injuries. And you talk about travel expenses. We can shut down all the travel expenses.
No, Mark, come on, man. If they played anyone ranked ahead of them, they would be
to the playoff, and who should be in the playoff. Correct?
That's ridiculous. That's ridiculous, Mark.
That's what you just said.
They would be double-digit dogs to everyone ranked ahead of them.
Yeah?
Who?
Do you want me to start to list off all the games that were won by double-digit underdogs this season? There's been at least.
Okay, how many of them? 20. How many of them were against the teams ranked ahead of TCU?
How many of them were won by teams that aren't even close to being as good as TCU?
Yeah, I think you're making an apples and oranges comparison.
You're telling me that a team is going to win a Big 12 championship and be undefeated, and we should leave them out of the playoff?
Yes, that's exactly what I'm telling you.
Vegas
because they're not as good. They don't belong.
Vegas told us to. See, you're now going back to your leaning on NFL draft selections and recruiting rankings to tell us how to evaluate football games that aren't played.
they also, I mean, they don't pass my eye test either. I
Okay.
mean,
They don't pass your eye test.
They've got a bunch of speed on the field. I'll give them that, but their line play is suspect and waiting to be exposed by if they played a good team.
John, you realize what you're saying may be true, but why don't they get the opportunity to prove that or disprove it?
Because there's only 4 spots.
But they've earned it if they've won the Big 12 and gone undefeated.
No, come on, man. That non-conference schedule, man, are you really going to defend their non-conference schedule?
I'm not going to defend their non-conference schedule.
Okay.
No, but they play in a conference with 9 conference games, unlike the SEC that plays 8. They're going to play 9 conference games in a deep conference. And if they are able to get through Kansas State, Oklahoma State, Texas, Oklahoma on down the line and play one of them again, unlike every other conference, it's guaranteed in the Big 12 that you have to beat a team twice to win the conference championship, correct? So one thing that's stated on here all the time by people is it's difficult to beat a team twice. But in the Big 12, you have to do that to be an undefeated champion. You will definitely play a team that you already beat. You have to play them twice to win a conference championship and be undefeated.
This is a really sensitive issue with you, isn't it, Mark?
No, it's ridiculous that we're going to not go by the results on the field. What? Are you serious? You're going to take a team that has won the Big 12 championship with no losses and just leave them out of the playoffs?
I'm dead serious.
They don't pass your eye test.
That's right.
Then why are we playing? I don't know why we're playing.
Because it's the SEC Invitational.
Because well, you know, the NFL draft is also the SEC Invitational.
Exactly. And we don't have to leave the South, so why should we? We're just a regional team.
If
we can't afford plane tickets, why should we?
So where's the cutoff point, John? That if the SEC right now has roughly, I think the numbers are about 330 players in the NFL, and the Big Ten is 250. They're number 2. Is that significant enough a gap that we leave the Big Ten out of the playoff as well?
No, of course not. No.
Oh, of course not. Okay. Where's that dividing line?
Well, I mean, it would be one thing.
That's right. It's your eye test.
It would be one thing if they had played at least one semi-decent out-of-conference game, but they haven't. They played 3 absolute cupcakes, Mark.
You're right. They did. But why do they play by a different set of rules than other teams do? Michigan played Connecticut, Colorado State, and Hawaii in non-conference play. Will they make the playoff? Will they make your playoff if they win the Big Ten championship and are undefeated?
I'm really not worried about Michigan because I really think they're going to lose to Ohio State, and at that point they're going to be out. So it's going to sort itself out, and I'm not worried about it at all.
Do you in any way understand my perspective on this?
Yeah, you're saying that they deserve a chance because they won the Big 12.
I'm saying that they earned it.
Well, I mean, and if the committee disagrees with you, I mean, what then? I mean,
well, obviously, we could shut down this stream and never talk about it again until the day the committee decides, because that's all that matters is what they think and decide. Correct?
Correct.
So they can put an 8-4 team in the playoff if they want to.
Yeah, I'm sure Notre Dame will be in the playoffs at 8-4 one day.
So the committee is a very difficult. My knock against the committee is more about the process that we have a committee. It's not a knock against their selections, although like Rick, I have issue with many of the selections that they make and rankings that they've made, but it's a difficult thing to do. And I don't think that they've missed it much. My issue with the playoff as it currently stands is, number one, we've got a committee selecting, and number two, that we don't have enough spots to accommodate the conferences. It's a mathematical problem when you've got 5 major conferences and you've got 4 spots.
True.
In my opinion. Okay. Anything else, John or Rick?
Or no, I was really actually waiting for Rick to respond.
I think you said it all, John.
Okay.
I mean, you had a great dialogue with Mark there. I'm not going to jump in on that, though. That's your opinion, and that's fine. I'll leave it like this. I love Darrell. He was all on Kentucky. Now Kentucky has 3 losses, and he's taken off his Kentucky hat, and he's got his SEC hat on. So I love it that he wants 3.
For the record, I agree with him. I think 3 out of the best 4 teams in the country are from the SEC, but at most only 2 will get in.
I agree. I agree with you. I think 3 of the best teams right now are in the SEC, and I'm going to love watching this Netflix series play out the last 4 weeks and watch this college football committee play the shell game and get those 3 teams in there. It's going to be a beautiful thing.
it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen.
Oh yeah, you watch.
So John,
it's fun to think about. I'm sorry, Mark, go ahead.
I was just going to say, my final question is, because you've used the term "what you think" a few times, so the selection of the playoff team should be based on what somebody thinks. I guess it's you, right? Or who are these people that should be?
I mean, it's ultimately what the committee thinks, right?
Well, we know what the reality is, but you've stated that you think this and you don't think that, and therefore this should be the selection of the playoff teams. Like, who should be making that? Like, should you make the decision? I'm being serious. Like, who's supposed to make this eyeball test decision on who should be in the playoff?
I mean, there's a committee in place. If it were up to me, yes, I would say, sorry, TCU, I don't care.
Okay.
There's at least 4 teams better than you. Try scheduling something harder next year.
But the other teams don't have to schedule anything harder because they've got future NFL players on the roster.
And they play other teams loaded with future NFL players on their rosters too.
Right. So that's why you could play New Mexico, UAB.
That's right. That's right.
Southern,
that's right.
Southern, the team that Dion's team just blew away. The thing now it makes perfect sense, John. I am so glad I got on this stream with you. It's been fun the last several months, going back and forth with you on the chat. But now I get to see, exactly how some people in the SEC think, and it's a beautiful thing. God bless you.
Oh, come on. Like y'all wouldn't be the same. Like what were you? I remember what USC fans were like back in 2003. Y'all were a pretty insufferable loudmouth crowd. So, hey, don't even, man.
Let me hold up a mirror to you, because we thought the same things about you guys, putting billboards up in LA. You guys were wonderful Cajun corn dogs, So hey, I get it. I get it. And here we are again. That's the beautiful thing, John. 19 years later, there's USC at number 9, and God, look at my rearview mirror, and there's freaking Bayou Bengals at number 10.
Maybe we'll meet in a New Year's Six Bowl. We'll sort it out.
Maybe you guys can find enough money to fly out of the South and
I never said money was the issue. I'm saying, why should we spend the money when there's no need? Why should a team like Florida spend the money when there's no need?
You sound like a G5 conference. Come on now.
No. What I'm saying is perfectly valid.
Give the fans what they want. Give the fans what they want.
And what is that? What do the fans want?
Well, they would love to see Florida and other parts of the country. But if you need excuses for Florida,
take it up with Florida.
Oh, yeah.
We have one caller waiting. If we had two, I'd displace two of you. We could bring in two, but we might as well just add to it because Brian's been waiting a long time. So Brian, how you doing tonight? Hello, Brian. You might be on mute.
Oh, my bad. How are you?
There we are. I appreciate your patience, sir.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, Mark. You can't go off of NFL talent. You have to go off of how the teams are actually playing on the field. If we did that, Texas A&M, who has been loaded with recruiting classes, but they're terrible. There's two sides to a team. There's the recruiting side, and there's the coaching and developing side. If we just went off recruiting, then we would just put the SEC on 1 through 10 just based off.
I never said it should be based solely on recruiting. It's obviously you need to win some games too, which which the three SEC teams I'm talking about, Tennessee, Georgia, and Alabama, they're kind of winning games in case you haven't noticed.
Well, how about this? How about this? The SEC has 4 out of conference games, right? You're criticizing TCU for their 3 out of conference games. Yet you guys still have the equal amount of trash teams that you play. You play 3 out of conference games, trash of 1 team. So really, you're playing the same amount of good teams. The TCU plays 9 teams that are in our Power 5. You're playing 9 teams that are Power 5. 3 of them are trash. It's the same schedule. It's the same schedule.
Name another team that plays a schedule as difficult as playing an SEC West conference schedule.
You pointed out TCU's out of conference, correct? And how bad it was. That's 3 games. They played.
And I'm saying overall schedule, we still play the most difficult schedules.
Mark, do you get what I'm saying?
Oh, I get what you're saying. Yeah. You're basically saying that SEC teams play 4 non-conference games, and only one of them's typically legit. So they play 3 garbage games, and those 3 garbage games match the 3 by TCU that they scheduled non-conference.
Exactly. I don't understand what's so hard to understand about that.
And I don't understand what you don't understand about when you have to play teams loaded with NFL talent for weeks in a row. You kind of deserve a break here and there.
9 games on your schedule are juggernauts. They're just not. Not all 9. You don't play 9 teams, or sorry, you play 8 teams. You don't play 8 teams, and you got that 1 out conference, which is a Power 5, and even that Power 5 a lot of the times isn't even a juggernaut either. So you might be playing a few teams on your schedule that are actually considered juggernauts. So I don't like how you're just assuming that all 8 SEC teams you're playing are just these NFL juggernaut loaded teams. It's not true.
I never said all 8 of them were, but guess what? Whenever you're a team like Texas A&M, you play teams like LSU and Alabama every year.
And App State.
Exactly.
Well, yeah, they all. I'm just saying, when you're in the SEC West, you play a tough schedule. Period. End of discussion. The SEC West has 10 national championships since 1998.
But your criticism was TCU's out of conference. That was your specific criticism, was TCU's out of conference.
Yes, and I'm countering your argument with the argument that the SEC's conference schedule negates that.
But that was not your argument. Your argument was the reason TCU should be left out.
Okay. So wait, hang on, stop. Okay, so in your mind, a Big 10, a Big 12 conference schedule is just as difficult as an SEC West conference schedule.
No, their out of conference schedule is just as difficult. Their out of conference schedule is just difficult.
No. Forget about the out of conference for a minute.
So forget your reasoning that you used.
And I'm trying to explain that to you, but you won't get past it because apparently your mind is stuck in one place.
Well, let me ask you, what's your reasoning for TCU being undefeated, being left out? What's your reasoning?
Crappy non-conference, and they play in the Big 12.
There we go, out of conference.
Yeah,
that's my problem.
I'm trying to explain it to you, and if you had a half a brain, you could understand it.
I don't get what we don't have to go there, man. But I don't get what's so hard to like. I don't get what's so hard to understand.
No,
I mean,
you're being stubborn and difficult, or you're just not very bright. Which one is it?
So your criticism once again is TCU's out of conference, correct?
Okay, again, I'm trying to explain to you. The Big 12's conference schedule is not as difficult as the SEC's conference schedule. Would you agree to that?
It's comparable, actually.
No, it's not. Please.
Yes, it is, because you guys play 4 out of
That's
conference, 3 are trash. You play 4 out of conference, 3 of them are trash. TCU plays 3 out of conference, they're trash.
How many championships has the Big 12 won in the last 20 years?
We're talking about this year. I don't do that.
What happens to the Big 12 in the playoffs?
I don't go by the past. I go by how you're doing this year. If TCU goes undefeated, for example, Michigan, right? I'm a Michigan fan. They have a trash out of conference. They have a trash out of conference, correct? If they go undefeated with their trash out of conference in the Big Ten, should they get in the playoffs?
No, that's different because you beat Ohio State. That's completely different. You'll have wins against Penn State, Illinois, and Ohio State. That's completely different.
And TCU has wins over number 9 Oklahoma. I mean, there's no difference. The only difference is Ohio State here. It's
Oklahoma State just got railroaded by K-State. All right.
We're talking about one game.
A team with a backup quarterback just railroaded them by almost 50 points.
Okay, we're talking about one game difference here, which is Ohio State.
I'm just saying, Oklahoma State appears to be a team that's falling apart. So I wouldn't. Tony apparently wants to jump in here.
I'm going to go ahead and back out. Thanks a lot for having me on, Mark. Good seeing you.
Thanks for being here.
I'm having fun with it, man. I just think it's a little hypocritical logic with out of conference. That's all I'm saying. Because SEC plays 3 trash out of conference teams, and the big.
That's not true. That's not true. LSU played Florida State this year.
But the other 3
played
are trash.
Utah. Are you calling Utah trash?
So you're telling me there's not an SEC team that plays 3 trash non-conference
Yeah, sure
teams?
there are. But
okay,
you know.
I don't understand. Typically, so for example, Alabama historically likes to schedule in the middle of the season an FCS school. Like, you don't think it's a criticism that the SEC only plays 8 conference games?
And again, I'm countering you with SEC conference schedules are more difficult than Big 12 conference schedules. Just
okay, I agree with that.
I'm
not disagreeing with that.
And that's why SEC teams play cupcakes. Okay?
I was just merely pointing out your original criticism. So if I agree to that, are you also going to agree that non-conference argument you're making is dumb because the SEC plays?
It's not. It's not dumb.
Well, explain. Hold on. So that was your premise. Let me jump in. That was your premise. I was driving and listening, and that was your point. You said TCU doesn't belong because look at their non-con schedule.
And I've also cited.
Hey, listen, we're letting you talk. When we're talking, you interrupt us. So when you want us to go ahead and say that, look at them, TCU, they're undefeated. Yeah, but look at their non-conference. They're playing. I can't even name some of the schools' mascots that the SEC plays for a non-conference. And I agree with you. Your conference is the most difficult conference schedule. However, it's circular reasoning to say, well, since we beat the SEC teams and the SEC teams are the best teams, and we don't play anyone out of conference, we're the best teams, and therefore we should get 3 teams in. It's absurd to say that a team.
I'm not saying 3 teams.
And then you say they don't have a shot at the table because you know what? The thing is your eyeball test, or we think that these teams are better, or we think these are 3 best teams. You know how we find out that they're the best team? We let them play each other. The best of them plays other conferences.
Oh, well.
If you want to have 3/4 of the playoffs be one conference, that's absurd. Especially when you have other teams that are undefeated that very well could beat them. I remember all the time. They think this is a great team coming in. I remember USC going up against Oklahoma, this great team with Heisman Trophy winners on it, and everyone thought it'd be great. And every time they were garbage. USC played at least a dozen teams better than them, over the past couple of years before we met up with Oklahoma. It's absurd to think the eyeball test you keep talking about. The only that we know there's a champion is what's on the field. If we want to go what we think is the best team, why don't we just go back to the polls?
No, man. The NFL talent on TCU's line, I guarantee you, It's not
Who
there.
cares
They might
that, bro? It's how you play
they
on
might
the
have
field.
one guy that's legit NFL talent on the offensive line. I'm telling you that.
John, you also told us that Vegas should determine who makes the playoffs.
I
said
said
that at one point.
No, I did
Correct.
not. I was merely offering a reasoning as to why. And again, those would all be double-digit dogs. These are teams ahead of TCU. They don't lose games as double-digit favorites.
What is the point of a playoff? Which it is that we've all decided it is clearly not a playoff. If we're just going to pick the 3 teams, the 4 teams we think are the best and stick them in there. What is the point of having calling it a playoff if you're just going to grab 3 teams already played each other and have lost to each other, stick them back in, and whoever wins this one gets to win the national championship? When we have an undefeated team, you say that TCU doesn't pass the eyeball test. They don't have NFL guys in the line, etc., blah, blah, down the line. Well, then guess what? They should get smoked if what you're saying is true. But I don't need to see SEC
again. There's only 4 slots.
Leaving out a team, a conference, a Power 5 conference champion who's undefeated. We're not talking about Central Florida here. We're talking to someone that won the Big 12 and beat some pretty good damn teams. And you can say, well, you know what, SEC. That's why. That is not logic, man. I'm sorry. It's not a logical argument.
Does LSU pass the eye test versus UCLA?
Are you talking about from last year, whenever they had a
no, this year. I'm talking about this year.
I haven't really watched UCLA.
UCLA has one loss
for like
right?
one quarter. To be perfectly honest, I don't really have a judgment on them. But I have watched TCU because they're ranked so highly, and there's all this talk of them being in the playoffs. And I look at them, and I'm just like, I don't see it. I see a team waiting to get smoked by 40 points in the playoffs.
Because I do think it's crazy that that LSU with 2 losses is ranked above UCLA with 1 loss. Personally,
yeah. I mean, again, maybe they'll meet on the field in a bowl game.
I guess my main issue with the committee is I don't care if you want to pick a goal for how you want to rank, that's fine, but I need consistency. And if there's not consistency with how you're picking teams, that's where my issue comes in. Because if you're picking Alabama ahead of TCU, who's undefeated, but they have 1 loss because of quote unquote eye test, because that's what it is. Why are you putting Alabama ahead of TCU if it's not because you just think they're better? Then you go to Clemson and Michigan, right? I mean, most people would say, yeah, based off eye test, Michigan is better than Clemson, but we're going off a resume with Clemson. We're putting them ahead. So it's flip-flop reasoning with both with those rankings.
Yeah, if anyone wants to use the eyeball test on the Texas-Alabama game, I came away from that game thinking, okay, if I could just evaluate this game with blinders and not know what I know about Alabama, then Texas was the better team on that day with a backup quarterback who had basically had a sprained ankle. They outplayed Alabama and should have won the game. TCU is going to be playing Texas, and they play in that same conference with Texas, but Texas loses to teams in the Big 12, like Oklahoma State, like Texas Tech, but they were able to go play Alabama.
Yeah, but come on, Mark. Has Texas played another game? Like they brought it that game.
What I just stated, is that correct?
Yeah, that was correct. But I'm trying to make a counter argument now.
Okay.
Has Texas played another game with that same level of intensity as they did against Alabama? Answer:
I don't have an intensity meter.
No. Oh,
I don't
come
have
on,
an intensity.
man.
Again, I'm using results, performance, and logic. You're using some intensity factor that doesn't exist, that can't be measured, that we don't know anything about, that you're apparently just making up.
I'm making up.
The last thing John wants to see is actually teams play on a field. John wants to live up this little world in his head where he decides who's good, who's not. Forget how they play on the field, Mark. It doesn't matter how Alabama looked on the field against traveling away and playing a quality opponent. Forget that. Listen to what John has in his head in his eyeball test, because realistically, that's really all that matters, right, John?
I mean, if you can't spot their defense moving so much faster, their line was playing so well that game.
Texas was moving
And I have since watched 2 or 3 other Texas games, and they are not moving they are not moving the same. They are not getting the same jump on the ball.
Ball with the starter? John, were they not moving the ball with their starting quarterback?
They were.
And were they not stopping Alabama with their front? And were they not stopping Alabama with their front 7?
What I am saying
were they,
is,
John? I ask you a question. Were they not stopping Alabama with their front 7 over there, the Longhorns?
Yeah, they were. But here's the thing: if Texas had played with the same intensity in those other games as they did against Alabama, Alabama would have beat them by 10 points. I think.
Again, you're grasping at something that we can't measure, and it's called intensity. I would think that if Texas was looking at their schedule fairly and justifiably, they would use that intensity in games that actually mattered more than the Alabama game, and those would be games that count toward going to a Big 12 championship. Why wouldn't they be playing with intensity?
Who doesn't play up for Bama? Who doesn't play up for Bama? It's Bama.
Well, and I think we're trying to they played in that game. Since that game, there have been a number of injuries. There's a lot of reasons. Football's dynamic.
Yeah.
It's not just the intensity. They just sustained injuries. There are a lot of issues to go into play. And you know what? Guess what? Just for 1 second. Guess what? I have all the respect in the world for Alabama. All the respect. They are your conference. Alabama is your conference. And I have all the respect in the world for them. But maybe, just maybe, John, they aren't up to that caliber this year. Did you ever think that for a minute?
They're not as good, but they're still better than the other conferences.
How do you know?
Again, eye test. I mean, like I guess we'll just have to win it all again this year.
Has Alabama?
Wait. We all win it all. Alabama might win it all. Georgia might win it all. Tennessee. You as a conference don't win it all, man. That's what just blows people's minds.
John,
you're not going to win it all. One of your teams is going to win it all.
John, in the very first college football playoff, I root for a team, Ohio State, that was a 10-point underdog against Alabama. So I don't know why in the hell I watched the game, because Vegas told me that they were 10 points.
Was it 10? I thought it was a little bit lower than that.
10 point. I believe I'm just about.
I think you're right.
Look it up. They were a 10.
8.5 is the number that stuck in my mind.
Well, regardless, I believe you can. Let's look that up. We'll look it up and verify. But I believe I'm correct. 10-point underdog, Ohio State. So I shouldn't have watched the game because Vegas had told me who's going to win the game. But miraculously, I don't know how it happened. Maybe Alabama didn't play with intensity. Ohio State won that game. And then they actually played somebody else, Oregon, 10 days later, and they were a 5-point underdog in that game. So again, Vegas was telling me I shouldn't be watching the game because my team's an underdog.
A 5-point underdog is
Ohio State miraculously won.
How about Michigan versus Ohio State last year? Michigan was like a what? Like a 14-point underdog? 12, 14-point underdog?
And again, my point is my ultimate point is TCU is not going to win a game as a double-digit dog. It's just not happening. Not against any of those teams that are ranked ahead of them. Wait,
that what makes college football great is upsets? Don't you want to see maybe a team have that opportunity to do? That's what makes college football magical.
Let me ask you guys this. Okay. Let's say TCU sneaks into the playoff at number 4, and they have to play, let's say, an undefeated Georgia team, and Georgia's favored by 16.5. Are you taking TCU plus 16.5 there?
I didn't say I'd pick them to win. I didn't say I'd pick them to win. We're saying that they should have the opportunity to do that. We're not saying that they're going to.
Exactly. Thank you.
There's only 4 spots.
John,
there's only 4 spots.
See this simple point. We get
you. You can have your
John.
You can have your charity teams and hang on.
Charity.
You can have your charity teams in TCU whenever we expand the 12 playoffs. Okay. To 12 teams in the playoffs.
Missouri is Missouri an NFL juggernaut?
No, of course not. Yeah. They
so
played
how were
one
they able
bad
to
game.
play-
Every team plays one
Okay.
bad game a year, man. Come on.
So any team could win one game a year. So if TCU got in, they'd have the opportunity to win that game.
I don't think John's ever seen an upset in his life, apparently.
And let me ask you this, John.
Hey, I haven't seen the SEC get upset by the likes of TCU in the playoffs very often. Is what I haven't seen.
Because those teams have not been allowed to be in the playoff, in the Invitational.
I mean, we could go back to 2016. I know Penn State had 2 losses, but they won the Big Ten championship and also beat Ohio State. I mean, I thought they should have gotten over Ohio State just based off those 2 things, and they might have fared better. Who knows? But let me ask you this: Alabama, do you really think that? I know you're about this eye test thing. How in the world can your eyes be telling you that Alabama's playing better than Michigan or any of the teams in the top 6?
They're Alabama, man. I mean, so
that goes back to your basic
like yes, they're struggling, but they're still finding ways to win games.
Yeah, any team that's good does that. I don't understand the point.
And also they have Bryce Young. I mean, come on, man. I hate Alabama, but Bryce Young's like probably one of the best players, if not the best player in college football.
One individual player, but as a team, as a whole, as a team, they're not playing better than any team in the top 6. I'm sorry, they're not. They've struggled in 3-4 games now. And their O-line, I don't know if have you watched their O-line? They had 30 yards rushing against Mississippi State. Did you know that?
Yeah, I know. It was 27 actually. I think it was actually 27 yards.
Okay, even worse. My point is that if you're going off eye test and not just off, they got all this recruiting talent and this potential NFL talent, and you just look at the film, okay, eye test, that's what a real eye test is. You're watching the film. They're not marginally this gap. There's not this huge gap between them and teams in the top 6. There's just not.
I never said there was a huge gap. I said they would win the games.
You said Alabama.
I think they are a legitimate top 4 team. Yes.
So you think they're playing better than Michigan?
Yeah. I don't think Michigan's that great this year, man. I think Michigan and Clemson are both overrated.
Okay, let's have a logical discussion here. Where has Michigan played worse than Bama? Because they've played better. They play better in every metric you could look at. Where have they played worse than Alabama? Yeah, Alabama has the better quarterback, but as a team, where have they played worse?
Well, I mean,
I want to hear some logical reasoning. I don't want to just hear, because I think they're better. I want to actually hear some logical points.
Well,
I don't think you're going to.
They've played they'll have played. Let's assume that Alabama and Michigan play each other in the postseason. Alabama will have played tougher teams.
I don't hear
and will therefore be more ready to play. They will.
That's not what I asked you. That's not what I asked you. I asked you. So up to this point, not the future. Up to this point, what have you seen, or what metric can you point to that Alabama has played better than Michigan? There isn't one. There literally is not one.
Okay, that's so.
So why are they better? So why are they better? Can I hear some logical reasoning why they're better? Not just I think they're better. Can you give me something?
Tempering. They'll have the proper tempering.
Tempering? What are you saying, man?
He's saying they're playing tough teams that makes them better. This is a lame look. If I
it's not. It's why your conference sucks, Tim.
On the field, though, what on the field are they better at?
Tempering is why the Pac-12 sucks.
What on the field are they better at? Can you tell me what on the field are they better at? Like what position? Let's go position group by position. What are they better at? Like on the field, based off numbers, based off actual performance. Where are they better? You have yet to tell me that.
Argument. He doesn't have it.
Because it's O line.
Nick Saban
running
versus
game
Harbaugh. Harbaugh chokes. I all but promise
Again,
you.
he has no logic. He has his SEC
We're-
spin, his ESPN block.
No one's arguing.
Yeah. Tim,
Chokes and
let me
Nick Saban.
let me remind everyone that Tim is the guy that made an argument for Alex Grinch being a good defensive coordinator, and we all see how that's working out right now.
This is his eighth game, John, and we're not talking about USC. Stick to the point. Explain to him.
No, we're talking about eyeball test and what we all know about football. And I'm telling you what I know about what I told you in the preseason compared to what is actually happening right now, and what you said in the preseason compared to what's actually happening right now.
Are you gonna let people talk, or are you just gonna keep talking?
John, wait, can you answer my question?
You're the one talking over me now.
Okay. Why don't we do this? Tim's going to make a point to continue off of what just was stated, and then we'll continue from there.
I don't know why he's dragging USC and Alex Grinch. I'm not taking that bait. I'm trying to find out from John. John, he asked you a very legitimate question. He's asking you, what have you seen on the field, stat-wise, etc., that would show you that Alabama is a better team than Michigan? Can you please explain that? You never gave an answer.
They have Saban and Bryce Young. That's
that's what you're basing your entire logic on, is they have Saban and Bryce Young. Therefore, you know they're better than Michigan. Is that right?
Who has played better so far this year? That's a very simple one right there. Who has played better based off actual data?
Who has Michigan played? Who the hell has Michigan played?
Does Alabama have a win like Michigan did against Penn State?
Okay, name the last big road game that. No, you answer this question. When was the last big road game that James Franklin won at Penn State?
So that doesn't make. So they're not a good team. You asked me
a question again. No, so you're not going to answer that question.
You asked me if they beat a good team. I answered the question. Not only did they beat a good team, they
James Franklin has a history of sucking on the road at Penn State.
So they're not a good team
on the road at Michigan.
So they're not a good team now. So Penn State didn't
not in that situation. No.
Wire last year. So Penn State didn't play Ohio State to the wire last year in Columbus. That didn't happen.
They lost, right?
That's not what you said. Sucked. You said playing well against it. Yeah, you said they sucked.
Can't win big games on the road. Period. End of discussion.
So a good team can't lose now. So basically, any team that's not undefeated sucks by that logic.
I'm saying there is a track record of that man not being able to win games on the road.
That doesn't mean the team's not good.
So beating him at home is not impressive.
So beating a team that's better than not only beating but dominating a team in the fashion that they did, something Alabama hasn't done all year, is not impressive.
I'm not sold that Penn State's a great team, but what Michigan did to Penn State and a good Penn State defense is clearly, to anyone that follows football, a very good win.
And Alabama doesn't have that.
Bring up James Franklin all you want, but what they did to Penn State was an absolutely impressive win to anybody who's not blind.
It's one of the top 5 to 10 wins in college football this year.
To dismiss it because of James Franklin, again, is just plain. It's like you and your eyeball test, these little things.
No, I mean, again, see, I'm all I'm asking for is name one impressive road win that James Franklin has at Penn State. Name one. Name one. You can't do it.
Hey, John, that's irrelevant. It's irrelevant.
No, it's not. No, it's not.
Oh my God.
It's called a precedent, Tim.
It's called logic, John. It doesn't.
No, it's called a precedent. The man can't win. Oh God.
John, he can lose 10 games in a row, right? And it still doesn't mean on that 11th game he brings a great team in with a great plan, play well and lose. It's what you're trying to make something that's illogical logic. It's not. Just because he lost in the past doesn't mean he can't have a good team, a good game plan, and get his ass kicked by a good team. You do realize that, right?
What's Alabama's most dominant win this year?
Alabama's most dominant win.
Yeah, and was it against a team that was as good as Penn State?
No.
I mean, it's not hard to.
Well, wait, but hold on, Brian. What about last year? I mean, this is the argument you're gonna get.
I know, but I'm not trying to go off last year. Yeah, I just don't. And not only that, Alabama has struggled in 3 games, lost 1 game, and has struggled in 2 other games. They won those games,
right?
Michigan hasn't trailed after the first quarter all year. You know how ridiculous that is? Michigan's defense has given up 3 points in the last 4 games combined in the second half.
Uncle Rico actually makes a really good point here. Uncle Rico is basically saying with his super chat, and we appreciate the super chat, Uncle Rico, that if we use the same criteria with Penn State as we use, or with Tennessee as we use with Penn State, then of course Tennessee would have no chance of beating Alabama because they never beat Alabama. And when has Tennessee ever won a big game? Never. Well, it's been forever.
In case you haven't noticed, Tennessee's been kind of terrible for the last 15 years, in case you haven't noticed.
Yeah, I kind of keep track of those things. So, yes, Tennessee did what this year? They upgraded, they improved, and they did what? Voila, they beat Alabama. Unbelievably. And what other wins does Tennessee have to its credit over the last 15 years that matter? Basically none.
Pretty much.
Yeah. Also, so if Tennessee goes in, are they going to Georgia?
Yes.
So let's say they go to Georgia, right? And historically, they don't do good on the road. They go to Georgia. Let's say they lose. Are they now not a good team because historically they're not good on the road, or are they a really good team who lost a game on the road?
It would depend on how.
Oh, now it depends.
Margin of victory. Yeah, it would depend on the margin of victory.
So, okay, Georgia blows them out.
I mean, Tennessee's a good team. No matter.
Okay, so that logic applies to Tennessee, but doesn't apply to anybody else. I got it.
Well, I'm not quite sure what you're. I mean, I never said Michigan wasn't good. I'm just saying that other teams are better. No,
you
said
Michigan. Penn State historically Franklin is terrible row, so therefore they're not a good team. So I said if Tennessee goes to Georgia, who also is not historically good on the road, and let's say gets blown out by Georgia, who's also a really good team, is Tennessee using your same logic now not a good team? Or are they just a really good team who lost on the road to another really good team?
It's not quite the same precedent.
Clearly,
what's the difference? What's the difference?
There's no difference.
No, John's gonna tell us the difference. It's not the same. What's the difference?
The difference is again the precedent of James Franklin not being able to win.
Tennessee is the same precedent.
You're going in a circle again. That's his point he just made.
Actually, Tennessee is more of a precedent because to Brian's earlier point, James Franklin has played some great Ohio State teams to the hilt. No, they didn't.
Yeah, but they still lost, didn't they?
Hang on, John. Yes, they lost the games, but they showed, because in the context of this argument, this debate, we're talking about the quality of teams. When you go to Ohio State and play the number 2 team in the country to 39-38, are you showing, did you lose the game? Yes. You technically lost the game. It counts as a loss, but you showed that you can play and compete at the very highest level. And they've done that multiple times under James Franklin, correct? Yes.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, they just played Ohio State tough this past weekend. Yes, it was at home, but they still played them tough for 3.5 quarters. You may not think they're a great team, but at the very minimum, they're a top 15 team. I mean, there's no way around that. And Michigan dominated them. Alabama doesn't have a win like that. And not only does Alabama not have a win like that, they have struggled in 2 games outside of the 1 loss. Michigan has not trailed after the first quarter. See how I'm pointing out actual statistics?
You kind of struggled against Maryland, if I remember correctly.
We didn't trail in that game after the first quarter, and it was a 2-possession. And it was a 2-possession lead.
That was a 1-possession game in the 4th quarter, wasn't it?
It was a garbage time TD where they kicked the onside kick. Clearly you didn't watch the game. And Alabama.
No, I watched it. I just don't remember it very well.
And Alabama had to stop Texas A&M from winning the game on the last play.
That's true.
So I don't know what you can point to that says Alabama's better than Michigan. Maybe Clemson. I'll give you maybe Clemson because they've had several close games, but Michigan no.
Let me ask you this: Do you think Michigan is a playoff team this year?
They're better than they were last year, and last year they were a playoff team.
No, I strongly disagree with that. And do you think you're going to beat Ohio State?
Wait, hold on. That they're not better than last year? You disagree with?
Yeah, you're not a better team than you were last year.
Where are we not better last year? What aspect of this team is not better?
Your line play was better last year.
Defensive line.
Ooh, I don't know.
Defensive line.
Yeah, I don't know what you're talking about. The D line's actually better.
Defensive line is better this year. They just picked up a top 5 center in the country from Virginia, Olawatimi. He's phenomenal. They are their offensive line is playing better this year.
Yeah, Blake Corum, right, has more yards and touchdowns than Derrick Henry did at this time during his Heisman season. Did you know that?
No, I didn't. Again, do you think you're going to beat Ohio State this year?
I don't know, but I also think Ohio State's one of the best teams, and not the best team in the country. So to say it's one thing to say, okay, you might lose to arguably the best team in the country, and you're still a playoff team. You lost to the best team in the country. There's 4 spots.
Hey, John, one more point. Whatever you want to make that, and we need to move on. We've got calls stacking up, and I was going to get off here 20 minutes ago.
Yeah.
Anything else, John?
No, I'm just kind of puzzled about the Michigan fans, the way they complain about where they're ranked. Because it's simple. It's going to sort itself out. Either you're going to win out and you're going to be in, or you're going to drop a game somewhere and you're not. And it really is that simple.
Here's what I believe they're concerned about. Whether this is justified or not, this is what I believe. They know that if they win their games and go to the Big Ten championship game, win that, they're in the playoff, obviously. They're concerned that unlike Georgia and Tennessee and Alabama in previous years, they could lose a classic game at Ohio State against what might be the best team in the country and be left out of the playoffs at 11-1, in which they are one of the 4 best teams in the country, as opposed to a Georgia or Tennessee or an Alabama in the past that would be given that invite.
Oh, I have to play devil's advocate here real quick, but shouldn't an undefeated TCU team get in over that?
I'm just telling you what Michigan fans are concerned about, and that's what makes them concerned about where they are being placed. The committee,
and I understand that, but what I'm saying is
rankings. John,
John, he's not telling you what he thinks. He's telling you what the Michigan fans think. He's not telling you what he thinks.
Yeah, I understand what they think.
John, you understand the committee tells us what their line of thinking is, the way they place teams and then move them. We will know more next week when Tennessee and Georgia play, depending on who wins or loses that game and by how much. The committee is going to tell us a whole lot by how much or how little they drop the loser of that game. They made a huge statement by ranking TCU 7th. They made a loud, bold statement. They tell us things by the rankings, so you can't just say, well, it'll work itself out, be fine with it. I get that. Michigan wins all its games. Yeah, you're fine, but they're not given necessarily the same concession as an SEC team that goes 11-1, doesn't make its conference championship game, and still can make the playoff.
Well, I mean, then this leads to another question from me.
Well, it leads to a final statement.
Okay.
I'm here all the time, John. Call back.
Well, no, just one more thing. Okay. If Michigan loses by, say, 3 scores to Ohio State, do they deserve to be in the playoffs?
No.
That wasn't.
Okay.
I don't think anyone could argue that.
Okay. All right.
And you know what? If the SEC team loses by 3 scores, do they belong to be in the game, John?
Probably not. No, I mean it just depends on what you're talking about specifically. Are you talking about an SEC championship game specifically?
I'm talking if you want to be a one-loss team going in over undefeated teams, you can't
probably not
where you lose by 3 scores.
Probably
Thanks
not.
for being here, John.
Okay, thanks.
Call back anytime.
See y'all later.
All right, let's. Oh, a couple people dropped off.
That was good times, man. That was good times.
We got Roll Tide here. Here we go. Roll Tide, what's going on tonight? Well, they left us. Okay.
Dropped out.
All right, we'll bring in Austin. Austin, how you doing tonight? Hello, Austin.
You mute? Oh, you hold on. I'll mute you, Austin. Go ahead. Oh, you muted, Austin?
Yeah, I don't know why.
I think you're muted, Austin.
Yes, I've tried to unmute him. You are muted, Austin. So if you can.
You hear us, Austin?
Austin, hello. Okay. All right. Austin, we'll bring you back in here in a second. We've got Brian. Do you have any parting shots?
No, man, that was fun though, man. I like to keep things logic based, keep it film based and all that. But I do think the Pac-12 is much better this year. I think UCLA should be ranked ahead of LSU. And I do think there's a lot of inconsistencies with the way if you want to go off resume, that's fine, but you need to be consistent about that. And they're not. There's certain spots where they're using resume and there's certain spots where they're using eye test. But
Mark, can you do me a favor? Hold on a second. Brian, hold on a second. Mark, can you do me a favor?
Sure.
Don't ever let me argue with Brian ever, please. I don't ever want to mix it. Brian, you did a really amazing job. And I appreciate all the logic you threw and a very illogical argument.
Yeah, no, that was fun. Those are the fun ones though, But yeah, I appreciate you, Mark. What's your name?
That's Tim.
Tim. Okay, appreciate you, Tim. Yeah, till next time, guys. You guys enjoy your night, okay?
Appreciate it, Brian.
All right, Brian.
Well, we did have a couple of people there in addition to Austin and whomever else was there, but they've dropped off.
Yeah.
All right, Tim. Well,
sorry, Mark. I couldn't. I was kind of losing. Is that John? The guy's usually in the chat. Is that the same John?
Yes. Yep.
Just wondering.
I get his point. I just don't agree with it. I get his point that him or whomever is just going to say, I think these are the 4 best teams. There we go. I watched Ohio State get manhandled by Michigan, and I still kind of thought, I still think they're one of the 4 best teams, but you know what? They didn't earn it. So you don't go. You didn't earn it.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's so funny because we had so many great wins. It's as college football fans, this is what we've always wanted. We wanted championships to be decided on the field, right? And we were begging for the +1. They said, "Oh, no, kids already played too many games. We can't do that one." And now we have these 12-team, 16-team playoffs we're talking about. And the more we do this, the more certain conferences want to exclude everybody and make it not about on-the-field performance, not playing into the playoffs. They still want to make it about the eyeball test. And that's exactly what we all fought about with even the BCS, what happened to BCS. And now we want to go back to it somehow. It doesn't make sense.
And I still wouldn't be okay with it, but I would understand it better if this was Major League Baseball. You're playing 162 games, and this sample size was enormous. And the SEC is just going out there beating everybody upside the head in the other conferences 90% of the time. I'd be like, you know what? Give them 3 playoff spots because look at this sample size. But when everybody plays like 1 game outside the conference that you can kind of get a read on something, and actually some teams don't even play that 1 game. No, let's not rely on what happened last year or 5 years ago or 10 years ago. No, it should all be about the here and now. and we don't have a sample size to justify any conference having more than one team in the playoff. We can't even get all 5 teams in or 5 conferences in.
Even if they were the best, see, if I were the best team in the SEC and I win the SEC, I don't want to play SEC again, not because I'm afraid to play. I've already beat them, right? I want to go out there and prove that I'm the best team in the country. How do I do that? By playing more SEC teams? No, I go out there and I beat the Big 12 champ, or I beat the Big 10 champ, or I beat the ACC champ. And I say, hey, look, I went out and beat the other team.
And one more point before we let Austin speak here. And I've laid this out as well and given metrics to this. While all recognition and credit should be given to the SEC for winning these invitationals, let's understand that they weren't objective playoff selections, but when given the opportunity, they did capitalize and win. Yes. Let's understand that they've also been given, I didn't say earned, they've been given more opportunities than all. How many opportunities has the Pac-12 been given to win the college football playoff? 2. They've been given 2. Well, the SEC, there's been 8 years, and twice they've had 2 teams in. They've been given 10 opportunities to win the national championship.
Yeah. I wish this thing was around back in the 2000s.
When Alabama and LSU played for the national championship, the BCS championship in 2011, you know what? It's kind of impossible not to win the national championship.
Right.
So that was part of the stretch of 7 straight. Well, you can't not win the national championship. Austin, how you doing tonight?
What's going on, Mark? I'm about ready to bring some Louisville Cardinals into your life.
Oh boy, here we go.
On behalf of our
Are you guys
Cardinal
playing
family.
for a playoff spot?
No, we're going to play for a bowl, Mark. We're going to stay on our level. Okay?
And I'm just kidding, Austin, because you should be happy and overjoyed and excited about your football team. You had a great win by 4 scores against Wake Forest last. And this is one of the great things about college football. It shouldn't all be about the playoffs. So we appreciate you being here.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, what do you think of our team now, Mark, after seeing the last couple of weeks and heading in to this week against JMU? Now that we could be possibly bowl eligible heading into this week if we win.
Well, I got to say that anytime I see a coach who has a team that seems to be off the rails and not performing well, and there's a lot of swirling talk about hot seats and last season, and you got to turn it around immediately, and they're able to do that, it's pretty darn impressive. So Louisville's been able to do that. And if you look outside the conference, the College Football Playoff Committee just ranked a UCF team at number 25 that Louisville defeated on the road.
It's Wake's ranked, so that's another good one to our resume in terms of getting into a good bowl. And the thing about it too is, Mark, that a couple weeks ago, if you would have told me that we would have been 5-3 at this point and possibly going for our 6th, I would have told you were full of baloney, because we were not playing like a 5-3 football team. We were playing more like a 2-5 football team. But we got it together, and here we are. Now, I don't know much about JMU. Tim, Mark, you may know more than me. How good are they? Enlighten me a little bit on that, please.
Well, I'm not going to be able to do a too deep personnel breakdown on James Madison. I apologize.
I just want the highlights. Is what
they looked like a really good team early in the season. They've got some pretty impressive wins early in the season, and obviously shot off to a 4-0 start, something in that range. That's about all I can give you. Obviously, this is going to be their biggest challenge of the season from a talent perspective.
I don't know much. Sorry. I've seen the scores, possibly a couple of box scores. I saw their defense numbers look really good, but again, maybe that's more a function of who they were playing and not exactly how stout their defense is. They lost to the Fighting Heltons, so I'm not sure. It was a tight game with Georgia Southern. They lost to Marshall. But then, Notre Dame lost to Marshall. Actually, I don't know. I have no idea, Austin. I don't know how good they are. I like your odds though. The way you guys are hot, they're on a 2-game losing streak, right, or 3-game losing streak, something like that. You guys are hot. This is time, but they're coming off a bye. That's kind of a worry, right?
Yep.
That's a little worrisome, but I feel like the way our defense has been playing, we can get it together. And one more thing I'd like to ask you, gentlemen. Alabama, LSU. Explain to me why LSU is number 10 at the moment. I would like to understand that heading into this game.
Have you? How long have you been listening to the show?
You know what?
Austin?
You got to talk to Rick. You got to talk to Rick. Rick will be able because you're a Discord guy. You're right. You're a knucklehead. Rick will break it down for you in one of our chats because he. I'm not completely sold on it, but a lot of what he's saying is, the real was kind of laughing at it, but he lays it out pretty clear. And who knows how close to it is, but it sure seems like their meteoric rise wasn't exactly merited. I'll leave it at that.
Is there a possibility that Alabama loses this game?
Absolutely. It's a possibility.
Yeah, sure. It's in Baton Rouge at night. It's a possibility.
Yeah. I'll put it in the 15 to 20% range.
And then Georgia, Tennessee. 1 versus 3. Anything can happen there. I'm surprised they put Tennessee ahead of Georgia at the moment, but that'll all get sorted out Saturday, right, Mark?
Well, again, the point that I made a few minutes ago was not so much that gets sorted out, but the life that committee may give to the loser of that game if it's close. If it's Tennessee and they're number 1 and they go to Athens, Georgia and lose 28-27, maybe they drop to 4. And
interesting.
The committee's telling us.
Thank you very much for your time, Mark. I know you want to get off here. Thank you very much. Go Cards.
All right. Appreciate Austin. The calls are piling up. So I appreciate that. But 2 hours, 35 minutes into it, let's get through these people and we'll bring on a few at a time. DeReal. Okay. DeReal, if you, I clicked you on here just to let you know, we do have a quota, 1 per night. So what do you got real quick?
Well, I just wanted to bring unity and I figured that was a good reason to call in again. And, with George being in the chat for the first time in forever, it feels like I thought I would do the 2-call system in honor of him because he normally calls in twice.
Yes. Well, all right. You're excused. DeReal, give me a call later. And that doesn't mean tonight.
Well, hold on, Tim. I agree with everything you said about the SEC. If they're the best, then they should not worry about playing other conferences. So you know what? Let's expand the playoff to 12 this season. Let's get the 3 best SEC teams in there. Let's get the Pac-12 champion, the Big 12 champion. Let's get the group of 5. Heck, we can even throw an FCS team in there just for the fun of it. And when I believe the 3 best teams being the SEC make the 3 out of the Final 4, I just don't want to hear anybody complain about it. That's all I'm going to say about it. Would that be fair?
We know that's not all you're going to say about it. Maybe tonight that will be all you're going to say about it.
Well, that's what I think is going to happen.
All right. Thanks, man.
Yeah, no problem. I know everybody disagrees with me, but that's the olive branch I'm willing to extend is we expand the playoffs, have guaranteed playoff spots. Every conference gets represented. I'm even willing to go to get group of 5 and FCS represented.
Okay. Got it. All right. Okay. Why didn't he punch in? Ian, what's going on tonight?
Hey, Mark. Yeah, so a lot of stuff going on. I just wanted to say with all the SEC talk, do we really think like LSU would beat Penn State? I'll just leave it at that. Is LSU that much better than Penn State?
No. But I think it's a very interesting, intriguing game. Do I think Penn State's that much better than LSU? No.
No, exactly. But are we so political with the SEC that we put LSU? You have LSU higher than 10, correct? Like you have them somewhere like 8.
Yes.
So I don't probably need to go down that road, but it's like if LSU's at 10, we got Ole Miss at 11. I'm not saying they're not good teams.
Yeah.
but you can place them and you can have Bama get those 2 wins. I don't know. It's like the paths and the roads are so different in college football that we can argue all day about it. But people, like certain teams, have things set up differently.
We can argue it, and we do. And as long as the argument's logical, I certainly don't have an issue with anybody tearing up my rankings in any such way, as long as they understand what I'm doing.
I like your rankings. I think your rankings make more sense than any rankings that I've seen.
Yeah. And so I appreciate that comment, even though you disagree with my LSU rankings. So both can, you're not going to agree with every ranking, but at least you understand my process and my logic. And I even state they're not flawless. It is a human, flesh and blood, doing the rankings. So nobody has any flawless, perfect rankings out there. And I think until you do them yourself, anyone out there, you don't realize the close proximity of these teams. Like 12 and 19 might be like this, might be like nothing. 42 teams are either 5-3 and 6-2. And I can tell you, after like tediously going through all those teams, that most of the 5-3 teams are only 5-3 because they played more difficult schedules than the teams that are 6-2.
And the hard part, Mark, is even when I'm just doing our simple, like our power rankings, even for the Pac-12, what people forget is they want to take teams right now. And the thing is, when you look at their previous wins and losses, you know, football is a dynamic sport. Who was hurt? Who had a bye? Was it home or away? There's so many factors that go into even just the wins themselves.
Yeah.
That people get lost at. You just can do the best you can. As long as you try to follow some logical point to get you where you are, then that is truly the best you can do.
And even the two sides of the coin that you just raised, even when you're evaluating a previous win, do you evaluate that previous win and continue to adjust that win or loss based on what's going on now and how good that team is now? Like, I can't think of a good example of somebody that's either taken a nosedive or somebody that's elevated since like the first or so, like Oregon. Or do you continue to rate and evaluate that win or loss based on how good you think that team was 8 weeks ago?
Well, I think that win by Georgia was impressive. But anyone here thinks that was a team, again, as we all have talked about ad nauseum. It was a team, a head coach's first head coaching game on the road, you know, new coordinators, etc. No, it's not even the same, remotely the same team. Nor is a team, you know, that played in week 1, even for Georgia, the same team they are now. So, I mean, it's so difficult to look at a win. That's why you can't say, well, the eyeball test tells me that these 3 teams should get in. And I don't care if you go undefeated and you're kicking ass and you're a good conference, you're getting some quality wins, you're still not good enough. That's the problem with that. You know how you fix it? You let the teams play on the field.
And
yes,
again,
it's not in a vacuum. And I think what you can take from a lot of this conversation tonight is that we clearly know we do not have equitable schedules, because that's what mostly people argued about. You have too many teams to sit there and try to, it's nearly impossible to rank all of them. Yeah, you have indicators and you do a great job, Mark, and a lot of people can sit there and do it themselves, but that's the problem. You don't have equitable schedules and you have 130 teams. So is LSU going to beat Penn State? Are the top 3 teams in the SEC better than the top 3 teams in the Big Ten? Yeah. Because Penn State's not better than Georgia or Alabama and Tennessee, right? We know that. But, I mean, at that point, it's like, I don't know if LSU's 8. I don't know if they're 10. They're a 2-loss team.
Yeah.
Where they're good wins. But, no, like, great show tonight, guys. I'm very happy to see George back. I wanted to hear J-Dub just call in and put his SEC goggles on and his Bama goggles, but I think he didn't, because he knows he's a smart guy. He's a very smart man, and I love hearing from him. But I'll leave you guys. Thank you so much for everything both of you do. Tim and Mark, thank you so much.
Thanks, Ian.
It's him, not me, Ian. This is his show, and he does it all. I'm just I'm just riding. I'm still in space.
We're letting Tim hang around.
You know what we got to do, Mark? I keep hearing I think, I see, this and that.
Yeah.
And that's where, again, it's clear that's where we're wrong. The closer to thing, and I don't think we have to go to 16 or 12 teams. We could have done with 8. You could have had, you know what I mean? You just had to have the conference, the Power 5, and maybe a couple other people thrown in there for close games. You're not sure the Power 5 champion.
Yeah.
And that's all we really ever needed. And just let them all play. Because then we don't have to think which conference is the best. We will know. Yes. And there's arguments to say, I want to think. It's just it's full of bias, and you don't. It's not fair to the actual champion, because they should have the right to defend and call themselves the champion.
Yeah, I think a lot of things. Like,
right.
I don't think we want to make this the Mark Rogers Invitational, and I'll say, I think these are the 4 best teams. I wouldn't even want to do that, because I want the teams to earn it. All right, we got Zach T. Appreciate the super chat, sir. Thank you.
Hey, absolutely, guys. Great show again tonight. Pleasure being here. Just kind of wanted to feel your guys' opinion on Illinois. Obviously, I'm a U fan through and through, but due to the fact I live in Illinois, I hear about them all the time. Really think they're kind of being shadowed under the radar. Again, we all know that the West and the Big Ten isn't the greatest. But at the same time, do you guys think they have a shot against Michigan? I think, certainly they kind of showed what they can do against a running offense, and absolutely picked apart Minnesota, held Ibrahim, in the red zone when they needed. I feel as though if they can stop Michigan's running game, and make McCaffrey throw the ball, they certainly have a chance. What do you guys think?
The thing about Illinois that's funny, and not to pick on John, one last parting shot on John, but he did kind of confirm, at least in his mind, that Illinois was a really good team, but his other arguments were pointing to NFL draft selections and recruiting rankings, and Illinois has practically, based on the recruiting rankings, the worst team in the Big Ten. Their recruiting rankings are horrendous. But if you watch the team on the field, they have a really good secondary. That surprises me, because that would usually not be a hallmark of a team that's been patched together and put together in a Brett Bielema team. They're a really sound team. Tommy DeVito, they are a team that can complement their running game with enough passing. They're almost a mirror image, but lesser talented than Michigan. So I don't know how that matchup's going to go their way in a few weeks when they go to the Big House to take on Michigan. I don't think that's going to go well because of that. I think they're almost too much like Michigan, but they're an extremely sound fundamental team.
Right, absolutely. And if I seen correctly, they have the number 1 rated defense, only averaging giving up like 8.3 points a game or something like that. So, I mean, you take that as it is, because the Big Ten West is so terrible. But at the same time,
they're not the best defense.
There's no power. Look at the quarterbacks. Look at the quarterbacks, and look at the offenses that they played. And I'm not again. They are a good defense. So I don't want to say just because they have played, but they're not good. But you have to kind of temper that. I think
they probably have a top 15 to 20 defense in the country. They are really good, but yes, they have been aided by playing marginal offenses. Now, the one offense that they did play that has explosive potential that was impressive was them shutting down Virginia, because Brendan Armstrong was coming off a season in which he led the nation in passing yards per game, 450 yards, and they put up 42 on Illinois last year, and then Illinois shuts them down to 3 this year, but then Virginia's continue to play like garbage on offense. So
exactly.
It's remarkable what he's done with that team.
Yeah, I mean, and he's bottom of the barrel team, and arguably they should be 8-0. I mean, they got absolutely screwed against Indiana. But like I said, I could foresee it ended up being a close game, only because if they can contain Michigan's running game like they did Minnesota's and Ibrahim, who knows what could happen. It could be a good game.
Yeah, it could be a good game. I would expect that it's going to be a decent game. I don't expect any kind of classic, but I think Michigan has too much for them, and the ability to raise it ratcheted it up a notch with their passing game that Illinois does not.
Yeah, like definitely agree with what you're saying. But anyway, I'll get off, guys. Appreciate the show. Thanks for having me on. You guys do a heck of a job. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Zach. Appreciate
care.
it. And I believe we've got our last caller of the night, Nebraska fan Cole. What's going on?
Hey, can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we got you.
So, Tim, I wanted to ask, this is going to make this quick. So, USC is using the same coaching search firm that Nebraska is using. We have heard nothing, like no leaks or anything like that. Was USC like the same situation? Like, are they just good at keeping their information private, or?
That was part of the problem with the circus that we had there before Bone got there. I think that when you don't have leaks, that speaks well to your administration. And a lot of this stuff is done behind the scenes. And usually the leaks we heard, I think, were just either curveballs or smokescreens or intentional. I do know this. If you are hearing things that are being leaked out, how often do those things actually come out? You know what
Today
I mean?
was the first time there's been like a true, I guess, leak. Like the Nebraska fan base was freaking out because apparently there's going to be a hire today and there's a Board of Regents meeting. It was either going to be Mickey or Matt Rule, but apparently Matt Rule has picked up a ton of steam here. I don't know why. I don't know how to feel about Matt Rule. What do you guys think about him?
He's an excellent football coach. I would be happy to get him if I was a Nebraska fan.
Yeah.
Even with like coming off of a terrible NFL stint.
Well, there's been a lot of really good college coaches that kind of don't do well, and you don't have to be a great NFL coach in order to be an amazing.
The thing that worries me about Rule is he's been very outspoken about how he hates recruiting. And as you guys know, it's not easy to recruit at Nebraska. So that's the only part where I'm like, I don't know. But if he keeps Mickey on his staff to recruit, then I guess I could see it working maybe.
Really good job at Temple and at Baylor, of course.
Yeah, it's been super quiet around here, and it's freaking everybody out. So hopefully we figure out something soon.
Yeah, I mean, any good coaches, that's probably a good sign. That means you probably have a line on some good coaches because, it means you have a line on a coach that probably currently has a job. You know what I mean? Right? That's usually how it goes. They're not going to want that leaked out because that's usually how these things go. So I think that you just got to be patient. I mean, as a USC fan, I wish I could say that every one of our hires was like the last one we had. We've had
Did
some really
you?
bad hires.
Am I right saying you guys did not see Lincoln Riley coming at all until like the day before the announcement?
Nobody did.
Nobody did. Yeah.
Nobody did. When Bruce Feldman that morning came out and floated some like just cryptic, can't remember what it was. Just something like, I'm hearing some things about Riley. Everyone, yeah, right. Okay, whatever. Sure. Yeah, Lincoln Riley. Sure. Nope. Nobody. They kept that thing airtight. Which is a testament to a good administration, I think.
I don't know if that's more the administration or the search firm that they're using, the Collegiate Sports Associates or whatever. I don't know.
Well, I mean, the administration is making the decision. So although the search firm is, clearly the ones doing the work, there's going to be internal information, and if they can keep it quiet, that's a good sign.
All right. Well, I'll let you guys go to bed. Nebraska actually released the inside video of its new facility, which is going to be pretty dang awesome. So hopefully that'll sell a good coach to come here.
Well, Cole, we know that you always join us on Tuesday, what used to be Tuesday night, now Monday night for the Nebraska show. So we have something interesting to talk about this Monday.
And for everybody listening, it could always be worse, and don't take winning for granted.
Amen. You don't got to tell me that one, brother.
Yeah. All right. Tim, appreciate you jumping on here.
Oh, no problem. I'm surprised you kept me on this long.
Well, why not? Why not? Okay. Everybody, we've got a Pac-12 game tomorrow night. We've got a pretty good one, don't we?
Yeah, absolutely.
What? Oregon State and Washington, correct?
That's gonna be probably the best game of the whole weekend, and they stuck it I think it was even Darrell said that. I think Darrell said the most Pac-12 thing ever is have the best game of the week on a Friday night.
Yeah. So, or you put it on the Pac-12 network, like the USC Oregon State game, which was the first decent, big game in the Pac-12 this year. So what we'll do tomorrow night, everyone, is we've got our West Virginia show at 8 Eastern, and then I'll come on here and take calls, and we'll lead you up to the 10:30 Eastern time Washington Oregon State game. We'll do that. All right, folks. See everyone tomorrow. Watch the videos. We'll see you. Thanks.